A stranger collapses in Hercule Poirot's London flat, clutching a cryptic note marked with a single number, 4. Who is he? Why did he die? The trail leads Poirot and Captain Hastings into a deadly game of cat and mouse, chasing for shadowy masterminds the Big Four across the globe. From the smoky cafes of Paris to the moonlit canals of Venice, from Shanghai's opium dens to a sabotaged train racing toward doom, each clue unravels a conspiracy to plunge the world into chaos. Can Poirot's brilliant mind outwit a faceless enemy orchestrating global destruction? Or will the Big Four's web of deceit ensnare them all? Chapter 1. The dust-covered messenger. The rain fell in relentless sheets over London, transforming the cobblestones of Baker Street into a shimmering mosaic of reflected gaslights. Inside his impeccably ordered flat at 221B, Hercule Poirot sat by the fire, his small, precise hands folded over a leather-bound copy of Les Miserables. His mustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed like a crescent moon in the lamplight. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward midnight, its rhythm a counterpoint to the storm's chaos outside. Poirot's eyes, sharp and green as polished jade, flicked toward the door. He had been expecting no visitors, yet his instincts, the little grey cells he so often praised, whispered of an impending disruption. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and occasional chronicler, lounged in an armchair opposite, a half-empty glass of brandy cradled in his hand. His boyish face, etched with lines from years of adventure, betrayed a restlessness. "Poirot, old chap," he said, breaking the silence, "you've been staring at that book for an hour without turning a page. What's got you so pensive?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Mon ami, it is not the book that holds my attention, but the absence of distraction. The world, she is too quiet tonight. And when the world is quiet, Hastings, it is often because she prepares to scream." Hastings chuckled, dismissing the cryptic remark. "You and your riddles. It's just a storm. Nothing more sinister than a wet coat and a ruined hat." Before Poirot could reply, a sharp rap echoed through the flat. The sound was not the polite knock of a neighbor, but a desperate, uneven pounding, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Hastings straightened, his brandy forgotten. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and he set the book aside with deliberate care. "Vite Hastings," he murmured, rising, "open the door. I suspect our evening is about to become most interesting." Hastings strode to the door, his military bearing evident despite the late hour. He swung it open, and a gust of wind carried the scent of wet earth and something sharper, iron perhaps, or blood. A man stood in the doorway, or rather, he swayed, his silhouette framed by the flickering street lamp outside. He was tall, gaunt, and coated in dust that clung to his tattered overcoat like a second skin. His face was obscured by a scarf, but his eyes, wide and frantic, burned with urgency. In his trembling hand, he clutched a crumpled scrap of paper. "Help, Poirot," the man gasped, his voice a ragged whisper. Before Hastings could steady him, he staggered forward and collapsed onto the Persian rug, a cloud of dust rising around him like a ghost. Poirot was at the man's side in an instant, his movements precise yet gentle. He knelt, his fingers probing the stranger's wrist for a pulse. "Hastings, fetch water and a cloth." "Vite," he commanded, his tone calm but laced with urgency. Hastings dashed to the kitchen, returning with a glass and a damp towel. Poirot eased the scarf from the man's face, revealing a weathered countenance, perhaps 50 years old, with sunken cheeks and a scar that snaked across his brow. His lips moved, forming words too faint to hear. Poirot leaned closer, his ear inches from the man's mouth. "Four. The Big Four. They know." The words were a dying breath, each syllable costing the man dearly. He pressed the scrap of paper into Poirot's hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man so near death. Then, with a shudder, his body went still, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Hastings knelt beside Poirot, his face pale. "Good Lord, Poirot, he's gone. Who was he? And what's that paper?" Poirot unfolded the scrap with care, as if it were a relic from a lost civilization. The paper was brittle, stained with dirt and what looked like dried blood. Scrawled in uneven ink was a single symbol, the number 4, encircled by a crude spiral. Below it, in a different hand, were the words, "Trust no one. They see all." Eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and determination. "This, Hastings, is no ordinary death. This man was a messenger, and his message is one of great peril. We must discover who he was and why he sought me." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. Poirot examined the body with the precision of a surgeon, noting the man's calloused hands, the foreign cut of his coat, and a faint tattoo on his wrist, a crescent moon pierced by a dagger. Hastings, meanwhile, telephoned Scotland Yard, summoning Inspector Japp, who arrived with his usual blend of skepticism and respect for Poirot's genius. Japp, a wiry man with a bristling moustache, surveyed the scene with a scowl. "Blimey, you attract trouble like a magnet. Who's this poor sod, and why is he dead on your rug?" "That, mon cher Japp, is precisely what we must uncover," Poirot replied, holding up the scrap of paper. "This man spoke of the Big Four. Does the phrase mean anything to you?" Japp frowned, rubbing his chin. "Can't say it does. Sounds like some secret society nonsense. But I'll have the boys run a check on his prints, and that tattoo might turn up something." While Japp's men removed the body, Poirot retreated to his desk, spreading the paper under a magnifying glass. The spiral around the four was not random. It had a mathematical precision, each loop equidistant from the last. "This is no idle doodle," Poirot murmured. "It is a symbol, perhaps a code. And the words, they see all, suggest an organization of great power and reach." Hastings paced, his mind racing. "But who are these Big Four? Criminals, spies, and why come to you?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Because, mon ami, I am Hercule Poirot. My reputation precedes me, even to those who dwell in shadows. This man sought me because he believed I could unravel the web in which he was entangled." By dawn, the rain had ceased, leaving London draped in a mist that clung to the streets like a shroud. Japp returned with preliminary findings. The man had no identification, but his fingerprints matched those of a courier known to Interpol as the Wanderer, a shadowy figure who carried messages for hire across continents. The tattoo linked him to a defunct Balkan smuggling ring, though its members had vanished years ago. Most intriguing was a trace of rare desert sand found in the man's boot, sand native to the Sahara. "The Sahara," Hastings exclaimed. "What's a courier from the Balkans doing with desert sand in his boots?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "An excellent question, Hastings. It suggests he traveled far and in haste. Perhaps he was pursued, or perhaps he carried something worth dying for." The scrap of paper yielded further secrets under Poirot's scrutiny. Using a chemical reagent, he revealed faint traces of invisible ink, disclosing a string of numbers: 48.8566, 2.3522. "Coordinates," Poirot declared. "The heart of Paris. This is where our trail begins." Hastings hesitated. "Paris, you're not seriously suggesting we dash off to France based on a dead man's scribble?" Poirot rose, his posture radiating resolve. "I suggest nothing, Hastings. I act. This Big Four is no myth. They are a force, and they have cast their net wide. We must follow the thread, or more will die." The journey to Paris was swift, arranged with Poirot's usual efficiency. By evening, they stood on the Pont Alexandre III, the coordinates marking a spot beneath the bridge's ornate arches. The Seine flowed sluggishly below, its surface reflecting the city's lights like scattered jewels. Poirot scanned the area, his senses attuned to every detail: the clatter of a distant tram, the laughter of a passing couple, the faint scent of cigarette smoke. "There," he whispered, pointing to a shadowed alcove beneath the bridge. A small metal box, rusted and unremarkable, was embedded in the stonework. Poirot pried it open, revealing a folded letter sealed with a wax stamp, bearing the same spiral-enclosed 4. Inside was a single sentence: "The game begins in the City of Masks." "Venice," Hastings said, his voice tinged with excitement. "The City of Masks. But what game?" Poirot's expression darkened. "A game of life and death, Hastings. The Big Four have challenged me, and I accept. But first, we must learn who they are and what they seek." As they returned to their hotel, a figure watched from the shadows, their face obscured by a fedora. The glint of a blade caught the moonlight, and a low chuckle faded into the night. Poirot, unaware, clutched the letter tightly, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. Back in their suite, Poirot spread a map of Europe across the table, marking Paris, London, and the Sahara. "The Big Four," he mused, "are not merely criminals, they are architects of chaos, operating across borders, manipulating events. This courier was their pawn, and his death was a message to me. Hastings leaned forward, his brandy long forgotten. "But why you, Poirot? Why drag you into this?" "Because," Poirot said, his voice low and resolute, "I am the one man they fear. My little grey cells will unravel their web, thread by thread. And when I do, the Big Four will fall." Chapter 2. The Cipher in the Shadows. The fog clung to London's cobblestones like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant chime of Big Ben. In Hercule Poirot's modest yet impeccably ordered flat, the air was thick with the scent of strong coffee and the weight of a mystery. The dust-covered stranger from the previous night lay dead in a mortuary. His cryptic scrap of paper scrawled with a jagged 4, now spread on Poirot's mahogany desk beside a tattered notebook. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, paced the room, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, this is madness," Hastings exclaimed, gesturing at the notebook. The man was raving secret societies, global plots. "It sounds like something from a penny dreadful." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath his piercing green eyes. "Mon ami, the ravings of a dying man are often the most truthful. This 4 is no mere doodle. It is a key, and this notebook," he tapped, "the worn leather cover, is the lock." Poirot's delicate fingers traced the notebook's pages, filled with erratic symbols, triangles, crossed lines, and numbers that seemed to dance in no discernible pattern. To Hastings, it was gibberish, but to Poirot, it was a symphony waiting for its conductor. For hours, he sat in silence, his little grey cells weaving order from chaos. By dusk, he leaned back, triumphant. "A cipher, Hastings," he declared. "A simple substitution, but cunningly disguised. The symbols correspond to letters, and the numbers denote word breaks. Our courier was no ordinary man he carried, a message of utmost importance." Hastings leaned over Poirot's shoulder as the detective revealed the decoded text. "Big for meet Paris. Caf. Lomba, 9 p.m. Below it, for names or code names emerged. Number 1, Number 2, Number 3, Number 4. The words sent a chill through Hastings, though he couldn't say why. "Paris, tomorrow night," Poirot mused, his voice low. "We must go, Hastings. This Big Four, they are no petty criminals. Their reach is vast, their purpose shrouded. We shall find them in the shadows." The train to Paris rattled through the night, its rhythm a counterpoint to Hastings' racing thoughts. Poirot, impeccable in his tailored coat, sat opposite, reading the courier's notebook as if it were a sacred text. "The Big Four," he murmured, "a quartet of masterminds, each a pillar of a conspiracy that spans continents. We must tread carefully, mon ami." By evening, they arrived in Paris, the city aglow with gaslights and secrets. Caf Lomba, tucked in a narrow alley off the Seine, was a den of smoke and whispers. Its patrons artists, expatriates, and shadier figures huddled over absinthe and espresso. Poirot, disguised in a nondescript tweed cap, led Hastings to a corner table, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "There," he whispered, nodding toward two men at a far table. One, gaunt and hawk-nosed, wore a black overcoat. The other, broad-shouldered with a scar across his cheek, clutched a leather case. Their conversation was hushed, but Poirot's keen ears caught fragments. "Number 2, Geneva. The plan moves forward." Hastings shifted, his hand brushing the revolver in his pocket. "Should we confront them, Poirot?" "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice a velvet warning. "We observe, we learn. The spider does not rush into the web." The men exchanged a folded paper, its edge marked with a familiar 4. As the scarred man rose to leave, Poirot signaled Hastings to follow. They slipped through the crowded café, the air thick with tobacco and intrigue, and trailed the men into the alley. But the shadows betrayed them. A glint of steel flashed, and a knife sailed past Hastings' ear, embedding in the wall. "Run," Poirot hissed, pulling Hastings behind a stack of crates. Footsteps echoed as their pursuers' 3 figures, now cloaked and silent, closed in. Poirot's mind raced. The alley was a trap, but a nearby market offered cover. With the agility belying his fastidious demeanor, Poirot darted through the stalls, Hastings stumbling behind. A vendor's cart toppled, spilling apples and chaos. Slowing their attackers, they emerged onto a bustling boulevard, the Seine shimmering under moonlight. Poirot's breath was steady, his eyes alight. "We have escaped, mon ami, but we have also learned. The Big Four are real, and their web is vast. That paper," they exchanged, "it holds the next thread." Back at their hotel, Poirot examined the scene in his mind, reconstructing every detail. The folded paper, glimpsed briefly, bore a name: Brussels. Vandermeer, a diplomat, Poirot said, his voice grim. The Big Four's next move is political. We must go to Brussels, Hastings, before their shadow falls further. As they packed, Hastings glanced at the notebook. Its cipher now a gateway to a global game. The Big Four were no myth, they were orchestrators of chaos, and Poirot was their hunter. The chapter closed with the train's whistle piercing the Parisian night, carrying them toward a new danger, the weight of the four heavier than ever. Chapter 3. The Vanishing Diplomat. The Brussels evening was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant toll of cathedral bells. Hercule Poirot, his moustache impeccably trimmed, sat in a dimly lit café, his keen eyes scanning a newspaper that masked his true focus, a cryptic note from London. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, fidgeted beside him, his teacup clinking nervously against its saucer. The note, unearthed from the coded papers of the dust-covered messenger, had led them here, to the heart of Belgium, chasing whispers of a vanished diplomat named Monsieur Etienne Laurent. It is not merely a disappearance, mon ami, Poirot murmured, folding the newspaper with precision. It is a thread in the tapestry of the Big Four. Laurent, he is no ordinary man. His work in international trade agreements makes him a pawn in their game. Hastings frowned, his voice low. But why him, Poirot, and why now? That note, with the number 4, it's like a shadow following us. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The shadow, Hastings, is cast by a larger beast. The Big Four seek to destabilize, to control. Laurent's disappearance is no accident. We must find him before the thread is cut. Their investigation began at Laurent's elegant townhouse, its windows dark, the air heavy with the must of neglect. A housekeeper, her voice trembling like the flicker of the gas lamps, recounted Laurent's last hours. He had received a letter marked with a bold 4, his face pulling as he read it. Then, without a word, he vanished into the night. Poirot's fingers traced the letter's wax seal, now broken, its crimson flecks like blood on the mahogany desk. This seal, he said, it is not local. The wax, it has a sandwood, perhaps. A clue, Hastings. The trail led to a discreet office in the diplomatic quarter, where Laurent's colleagues whispered of his recent agitation. Poirot, posing as a French trade official, coaxed a nervous clerk into revealing Laurent's last appointment, a meeting with a shadowy financier known only as Monsieur V. The clerk's hands shook as he handed over a ledger, its pages filled with cryptic transactions. He was afraid, the clerk stammered. He said they were watching. That night, Brussels cloaked itself in fog, the kind that muffled footsteps and turned lamplights into ghostly halos. Poirot and Hastings followed the ledger's trail to a nondescript warehouse by the Seine River, its waters gurgling like a conspirator's whisper. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the tang of ink and metal. Poirot's torchlight danced across crates stamped with foreign seals until it settled on a hidden panel in the wall. With a soft click, it opened, revealing a safe Mondier. Poirot breathed, his gloved fingers working the lock with the delicacy of a pianist. The safe yielded a cache of documents, trade agreements, financial transfers, and a single name scrawled in hasty ink, Li Changyen. Hastings gasped. The Chinese magnate, could he be one of the Big Four? Before Poirot could answer, a muffled groan echoed from a shadowed corner. There, bound and gagged, was Etienne Laurent, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. Poirot knelt beside him, cutting the ropes with a pocketknife. Monsieur Laurent, you are safe now, he said, his voice calm but firm. But tell me, what did they do to you? Laurent's voice was hoarse, his words fragmented. They took my memories. A drug, I think. They wanted my codes, my agreements, for him, for Li. His head lolled, his mind clouded by some chemical haze. Poirot's brow furrowed. Amnesia, he muttered. A cruel tool to silence a man without killing him. As Hastings helped Laurent to his feet, Poirot sifted through the documents. One page stood out. A transfer of millions to a Shanghai account, linked to Li Changyen. This is no mere financier, Poirot said, his voice sharp as a blade. Li Changyen is a puppeteer, pulling strings across continents. He is number 1. Hastings in Brussels is but a knot in his web. The chapter closed with Laurent safely delivered to a hospital, his memory a fog that might never clear. Poirot stood by the river, the documents tucked into his coat, his mind alight with the next move. "To Shanghai, Hastings," he declared, his eyes narrowing against the mist. "We hunt the dragon in his lair." Chapter 4. The Dragon's Gambit. The air in Shanghai was thick with the scent of jasmine and coal smoke, a heady blend that clung to Hercule Poirot's tailored coat as he stepped onto the bustling Bund. Neon signs flickered in the dusk, casting their garish glow across the Huangpu River, where junks and steamers jostled for space. The city was a paradox, ancient yet modern, serene yet chaotic. Count Poirot, with his fastidious mustache and polished cane, stood out like a diamond in a coal mine. Beside him, Captain Hastings adjusted his fedora, his eyes wide as he took in the kaleidoscope of rickshaws, street vendors, and silk-clad merchants. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but sharp, "this is no place for the unwary. Shanghai is a chessboard, and we are but pawns unless we move with precision." Hastings nodded, though his gaze lingered on a woman in a crimson cheongsam selling roasted chestnuts. "Precision, right. But where do we start, Poirot? This Li Chang-yen fellow could be anywhere in this pandemonium." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The dragon does not hide in the open, Hastings. Li Chang-yen, suspected to be number one of the Big Four, is a man of shadows. We begin where the shadows are deepest." Their journey to Shanghai had been spurred by the amnesiac diplomat's cryptic mention of a Chinese magnate, a name whispered in Brussels' clandestine circles, Li Chang-yen. The ledger recovered from the dead courier in London had further cemented the connection, its pages filled with coded transactions pointing to Shanghai's financial underworld. Poirot's little grey cells had pieced together a paternal web of influence spun by a mastermind who manipulated markets and men with equal ease. Now, standing on the Bund, Poirot felt the weight of the challenge. This was no ordinary Whodunit. Their first lead came from a contact at the British consulate, a nervous clerk named Pritchard, who had overheard whispers of a secretive meeting at the House of the Jade Orchid, an opium den tucked in the French concession. "It's a dangerous place," Mr. Poirot, Pritchard had warned, his hands trembling as he passed them a hand-drawn map. "They say Li Chang-yen's eyes are everywhere." As night fell, Poirot and Hastings navigated the labyrinthine alleys of the French concession, where gas lamps cast long wavering shadows. The air grew heavy with the sickly sweet aroma of opium, and the distant wail of a erhu lent an eerie soundtrack to their mission. The House of the Jade Orchid was a long building, its facade adorned with carved dragons and faded red lanterns. A burly doorman eyed them suspiciously, but a discreet bribe slipped from Poirot's gloved hand granted them entry. Inside, the den was a haze of smoke and murmurs. Men and women lounged on silk cushions, their eyes glazed as they inhaled from long pipes. Poirot's keen gaze swept the room, noting the subtle exchanges. A nod here, a folded note passed there. He motioned for Hastings to take a seat near a lacquered screen, where they could observe without drawing attention. "Pretend to smoke," Mon ami Poirot whispered, handing Hastings an unlit pipe. "But do not inhale. We must remain sharp." Hastings fumbled with the pipe, his discomfort palpable. "This place gives me the creeps, Poirot. How do we even know Li's here?" "We do not," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing as a man in a tailored silk robe entered from a curtained doorway. "But we watch, and we listen." The man in the silk robe, tall, with a shaved head and a scar tracing his jaw, moved with the grace of a panther. He approached a table where a wiry European in a linen suit sat, sipping tea. The two exchanged brief words, their voices too low to carry. Poirot leaned closer, his fingers tightening round his cane. "Notice the envelope, Hastings," he murmured. "The European passes it beneath the table. A transaction, perhaps." Before Hastings could respond, the silk-robed man glanced their way, his eyes dark and unreadable, locked onto Poirot's. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, with a faint smirk, the man turned and disappeared behind the curtain. "Blast it, Poirot, he's onto us," Hastings hissed, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver in his coat. "Comtois," Poirot said, rising smoothly. "We follow, discreetly." They slipped behind the curtain, entering a narrow corridor lined with flickering oil lamps. The air grew colder, the opium haze thinning. At the corridor's end, a spiral staircase descended into darkness. Poirot's cane tapped softly as they descended, the sound echoing like a metronome. At the bottom, they found a heavy iron door, slightly ajar. Poirot pushed it open, revealing a cavernous chamber lit by a single chandelier. The room was a stark contrast to the den above, sterile, modern, with walls lined by filing cabinets and a massive tick desk at its center. Behind the desk sat the silk-robed man, his scar gleaming under the light. 2 burly guards flanked him, their hands resting on holstered pistols. "Monsieur Poirot," the man said, his voice smooth as silk. "I expected you sooner." Poirot raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "And you have the advantage, Monsieur Commiway," the man replied, leaning back in his chair. "You are far from London, detective. What brings you to my city?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "A matter of numbers. Specifically, the number 4. Way's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "A curious choice. Tell me, what do you know of this 4? "Enough to know it is a veil," Poirot said, stepping closer. "A veil hiding a man named Li Chang-yen, who weaves a web of chaos across the globe." The guards tensed, but Wei raised a hand to still them. "Bold words, but you have no proof, only whispers and dead men." "Then enlighten me," countered. "What is the House of the Jade Orchid, if not a hub for your master's schemes?" Wei laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You see shadows where there are none. This is merely a place of respite. But since you are so curious," he gestured to a guard, who produced a small jade box from a cabinet. Wei opened it, revealing a stack of promissory notes. "A gift, proof of my goodwill. Take them and leave." "Shanghai." Hastings, unable to contain himself, blurted, "You think we'll be bought off? We know you're with the Big 4. Wei's eyes darkened. "You know nothing, Englishman, and you are out of your depth." Before Poirot could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The chandelier exploded, plunging the room into darkness. Shouts and gunfire erupted as Poirot grabbed Hastings and dove behind a cabinet. In the chaos, Wei's voice cut through. "Kill them." Poirot's mind raced. The attack was no accident. Someone else was in play. He whispered to Hastings, "Stay low. We must reach the desk." Crawling through the darkness, they navigated by the muzzle flashes of the guards' guns. Poirot's fingers brushed the desk's edge, finding a hidden drawer. Inside, he felt the cool leather of a ledger. He slipped it into his coat just as a beam of light pierced the room. A flashlight held by a new figure, cloaked and masked. "Enough." The cloaked figure barked in accented English. "Wei, you failed. The Belgian lives." Wei's silhouette froze. "You, how dare you interfere?" The cloaked figure fired a warning shot, silencing Wei. "Poirot, take your friend and go. This is not your fight yet." Poirot, clutching the ledger, weighed his options. The cloaked figure was an enigma, possibly an ally, possibly a new threat, but survival trumped curiosity. He pulled Hastings to his feet, and they bolted for the staircase as the cloaked figure held Wei's men at bay. Back in the alley outside, Poirot and Hastings gasped for air, the ledger heavy in Poirot's hands. "Who was that?" Hastings panted. "And why help us?" "Questions for another day," Poirot said, his eyes scanning the shadows. "For now, we have what we came for." They retreated to their hotel, a modest establishment overlooking the Bund. In their room, pored over the ledger under a flickering lamp. Its pages were a treasure trove, coded transactions, shell companies, and dozens of names linked to the Big Four's financial network. One entry stood out, a shipment of gold to Venice, marked with a symbol resembling a mask. "Venice," Poirot murmured. The next move on the board, Hastings slumped into a chair, his face pale. "And Li Chang-yen. We were so close." "Nan mon ami," Poirot said, his voice firm. "Li was never here. Wei was a pawn, a shield for the dragon. But we have wounded his empire. The ledger is our weapon." As dawn broke over Shanghai, painting the river gold, Poirot closed the ledger. The city buzzed below, oblivious to the war waged in its shadows. Li Chang-yen had slipped away, but Poirot's resolve was unshaken. The dragon's gambit had failed, and the hunt for the Big Four would continue. Chapter 5. The Venetian masquerade. The air in Venice was thick with the scent of salt and secrets, the city's labyrinthine canals shimmering under a crescent moon. Hercule Poirot adjusted the velvet mask that concealed his face, its golden filigree, catching the flicker of torchlight as he stepped from a gondola onto the slick cobblestones of a narrow quay. His disguise as a Venetian nobleman was impeccable, a tailored black cape, a tricorn hat tilted at a rakish angle, and a silver cane that clicked rhythmically against the stones. Beside him, Captain Hastings, less comfortable in his own elaborate costume, tugged at the ruffled collar of his emerald green doublet. "Poirot, I feel like a peacock in this get-up," Hastings muttered, glancing warily at the shadowed arches around them. "Are you certain this masquerade is where we'll find answers?" Poirot's mustache twitched beneath his mask, a faint smile betraying his amusement. "Mon ami, in Venice, secrets hide behind masks, and tonight we shall unmask one of the Big Four's operatives. The invitation we intercepted was no accident. It is a thread in their web, and we must pull it carefully." The invitation, a delicate card embossed with a crimson 4, had been found among the belongings of the dust-covered messenger from London. It had led them here, to the Palazzo dei Susciori, a grand but decaying estate on the Grand Canal, where a masked ball was rumoured to conceal a meeting of the Big Four's agents. Poirot's little grey cells had been working tirelessly, piecing together fragments of the global conspiracy they had uncovered in Shanghai. Li Changyen, the elusive number 1, was orchestrating chaos through a network of operatives, and tonight one of them would be within reach. The Palazzo's facade loomed ahead, its Gothic arches draped in ivy, its windows glowing with the amber light of chandeliers. Masked revelers spilled from gondolas, their laughter echoing across the water as they ascended the marble steps. Poirot and Hastings joined the throng, blending seamlessly into the kaleidoscope of silk and feathers. Inside, the ballroom was a whirl of decadence. Crystal goblets clinked, violins wove a haunting melody, and dancers spun in a dizzying waltz, beneath frescoed ceilings depicting gods and monsters locked in eternal struggle. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the crowd, noting every detail: the glint of a jeweled dagger at a lady's waist, the nervous twitch of a man's gloved hand, the way a masked figure in a scarlet cloak lingered too long near a shadowed alcove. "Observe, Hastings," he whispered, leaning close. "In a masquerade, the truth lies in what is not concealed. Watch for the one who moves with purpose, not pleasure." Hastings nodded, though his gaze darted nervously. "How do we even know who we're looking for? Everyone's hidden behind these blasted masks." "Patience, mon ami. The Big Four are clever, but they cannot resist the theatrical. Their operative will reveal themselves through action, a word, a gesture, a slip. We must be the hunters, not the hunted." They moved through the crowd, Poirot's cane tapping a deliberate rhythm as he navigated the sea of masked faces. He paused near a marble fountain, where water cascaded into a basin carved with serpents. A woman in a silver mask, her gown shimmering like moonlight on water, caught his eye. She stood alone, her posture too composed, her gloved fingers tracing the edge of a fan with calculated precision. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, his French accent thickened for effect, "your elegance rivals the stars. Might I have the honor of a dance?" The woman's lips curved, but her eyes, visible through the slits of her mask, were cold, assessing. "You flatter me, monsieur," she replied, her voice low and melodic, tinged with an accent Poirot couldn't quite place. Italian perhaps, but with an undercurrent of something else. "But I fear I am not here for dancing." "Then why, pray, are you here?" Poirot asked, his tone light but his gaze piercing. Her smile tightened, and she snapped her fan shut. "To see and be seen, of course. Isn't that the purpose of a masquerade?" She turned, her gown swishing as she glided toward a curtained doorway. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. "Follow her, mon ami, but discreetly. She is no ordinary guest." Hastings slipped into the crowd, his green doublet blending with the revelers as he trailed the woman in silver. Poirot, meanwhile, moved toward the alcove, where the scarlet-cloaked figure had lingered earlier. The space was empty now, but a faint scent of tobacco and cloves hung in the air, and a single rose petal lay on the floor, its edges curling as if freshly plucked. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the petal. "A signal," he murmured, "or a distraction?" A sudden commotion drew his attention, a glass shattering, a woman's gasp. Across the ballroom, a man in a harlequin mask staggered, clutching his chest before collapsing onto the polished floor. The crowd parted, murmurs rippling like waves. Poirot hurried forward, his cane abandoned as he knelt beside the man. The harlequin's mask had slipped, revealing a pale, sweat-slicked face, eyes wide with terror. A tiny dart, no larger than a needle, protruded from his neck. "Poison," Poirot said softly, his fingers hovering over the dart without touching it. He scanned the crowd, but the woman in silver was gone. and Hastings was nowhere in sight. "Monsieur, can you speak?" he asked the dying man. The Harlequin's lips moved, forming a single word, for his breath rattled, and he went still. Poirot stood, his mind racing. The dart was no crude weapon, it was precise, surgical, the work of a professional. The Big Four were here, and they were watching. He slipped the dart into a handkerchief, tucking it into his pocket for later analysis. The crowd's panic grew, but Poirot's focus was unbroken. He needed Hastings. Outside, in the moonlit courtyard, Hastings trailed the woman in silver as she slipped through a side gate into a narrow canal-side path. The air was damp, the canal's water lapping against mossy stones. She moved with purpose, her steps silent, her fan now tucked into a hidden pocket in her gown. Hastings kept his distance, his heart pounding. He wasn't a detective like Poirot, but he knew danger when he saw it. The woman paused at a small bridge, glancing over her shoulder. Hastings ducked behind a crumbling statue, his breath shallow. She reached into her gown and withdrew a small vial, its contents glinting faintly in the moonlight. Before Hastings could react, a shadow detached itself from the darkness, a man in a black mask, his movements swift and predatory. He seized the woman's wrist, and she gasped, the vial slipping from her fingers and shattering on the cobblestones. "You're late," the man hissed, his voice low and guttural. "The plans are in motion. Number 2 expects the formula tonight." The woman wrenched her arm free, her composure cracking. "I have it, but we're compromised. Someone's watching." Hastings froze, his hand inching toward the revolver, hidden beneath his doublet. Before he could act, a second figure emerged from the shadows, a gondolier, his pole raised like a weapon. The black-masked man spun, but too late. The pole struck his temple, and he crumpled. The woman in silver screamed, bolting toward the canal. But the gondolier was faster, grabbing her arm and pinning her against the bridge's railing. "Tell me where the formula is." The gondolier growled, his voice oddly familiar to Hastings. It wasn't Italian, it was English, clipped and precise. Hastings stepped forward, his revolver drawn. "Let her go," he shouted, his voice echoing across the water. The gondolier turned, his face obscured by a simple black mask. "Hastings, you fool," he said, and Hastings realized with a jolt that it was the detective had shed his nobleman's disguise, adopting the gondolier's garb to move unnoticed. "Poirot." Hastings lowered his revolver, stunned. "How no time, mon ami," Poirot snapped, his grip on the woman unyielding. "Madame, you will tell us of this formula, or I shall ensure the Venetian policia take a great interest in your activities." The woman's eyes darted between them, calculating. Then, with a sudden twist, she drove her heel into Poirot's foot and broke free, sprinting toward the canal's edge. Hastings lunged, tackling her to the ground just as she reached for a hidden blade in her sleeve. The struggle was brief but fierce, her strength surprising for her slender frame. Poirot, recovering quickly, bound her wrists with a cord from his gondola. "Who are you?" Poirot demanded, his voice like steel. "And what is this formula you carry for the Big Four?" The woman spat, her mask slipping to reveal sharp cheekbones and a defiant glare. "You're too late, Poirot. The formula is already gone, delivered to number 2. You'll never stop us." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "We shall see, Madame Hastings. Search her." Hastings, still catching his breath, patted down her gown, finding a small notebook tucked into a hidden pocket. Its pages were filled with chemical equations and diagrams, written in a precise hand. Poirot flipped through it, his expression darkening. "A biochemical agent," he murmured, "capable of destabilizing entire populations if released. This is no mere conspiracy, it is a weapon of chaos." The woman laughed, a brittle sound. "You think you've won. Number 2 is untouchable. She's already left Venice, and you'll never find her. Number 2. Poirot seized on the word. "A woman." Then her name. "Madame, give it to me." The woman's lips curled. "Claudette Moreau. But you're chasing a ghost, Poirot. She's always one step ahead." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who was still reeling from the encounter. "Take her to the gondola, mon ami. We must deliver her to the authorities, but discreetly. The Big Four must not know we are so close." As they rode back to the palazzo, the woman bound and silent, Poirot's mind was already racing ahead. Claudette Moreau, the French actress, was number 2, a master of deception, as the woman in silver had been. The notebook was a significant find, but it was only a piece of the puzzle. The Big Four were planning something catastrophic. and Venice was merely one stage in their global performance. Back at the Palazzo, the masquerade had descended into chaos after the Harlequin's death. Poirot and Hastings slipped away before the authorities arrived, leaving the woman in silver to be found by a passing patrol. The notebook, safely tucked into Poirot's coat, held the key to their next move, Paris, where Claudette Moreau was likely hiding. As their gondola glided through the moonlit canals, Hastings broke the silence. "Poirot, do you think we're getting closer, or are they just toying with us?" Poirot's eyes gleamed beneath his mask. "They are clever, Hastings, but they underestimate Hercule Poirot. Tonight, we have unmasked one of their operatives and gained a vital clue. The web of deceit is unraveling, mon ami, and we shall follow its threads to the heart of the Big Four." The gondola slipped into the shadows, the city's secrets whispering round them as they vanished into the night. Chapter 6. The actress's deception. The Parisian night shimmered with a restless energy, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant hum of jazz drifting from a nearby bistro. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat as he stepped out of a taxi onto the bustling Rue de Rivoli. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, scanned the street with a mix of excitement and unease. "Poirot," Hastings murmured, his voice barely audible over the clatter of passing carriages and the chatter of evening strollers. "Are you certain this actress, Claudette Moreau, is the key to unraveling the Big Four? She's a performer, not a mastermind." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mon ami, the stage is a perfect mask for deception. A woman who can command the hearts of thousands from a spotlight can just as easily manipulate the strings of a darker plot. Claudette Moreau is no mere actress, she is number 2 of the Big Four, and tonight we shall see her true face." Their destination was the Théâtre des Étoiles, a grand old venue nestled in the heart of Paris. Its marquee glowed with golden light, announcing La Reine des Ombres, a melodrama starring the enigmatic Claudette Moreau. The play was the talk of the city, its star a vision of elegance and mystery whose performances left audiences spellbound. But Poirot's interest lay not in her artistry but in the whispers that had reached his ears, whispers of blackmail, coded messages, and a connection to the shadowy organization that threatened global stability. That as they entered the theatre's opulent foyer, Poirot's sharp eyes darted across the crowd. Velvet-clad patrons sipped champagne, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Hastings, tugging at his tie, felt out of place among the glittering elite. "This feels more like a gala than a stakeout," he muttered. "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The grandeur is but a facade. Observe the details, the flicker of a glance, the tension in a smile. The truth hides in the smallest gestures." They took their seats in a private box overlooking the stage, a vantage point Poirot had secured through a discreet favor from an old friend in the Parisian police. The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose, revealing a set draped in shadows and crimson silk. Claudette Moreau appeared, her presence commanding the stage like a storm capturing the sky. Her raven hair cascaded in waves, her emerald eyes gleaming with an intensity that seemed to pierce the audience's souls. Her voice, rich and hypnotic, wove a tale of betrayal and revenge, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. "Look at her hands, Hastings," he whispered, leaning forward. "See how they linger on the prop dagger, how her fingers trace its edge with purpose. That is not the gesture of an actress lost in her role. That is calculation." The play unfolded, a labyrinth of intrigue that mirrored the real-life conspiracy Poirot sought to unravel. In the second act, Claudette's character delivered a monologue about a secret society controlling the fates of nations, a line that struck Poirot as more than mere coincidence. He noted the way her eyes swept the audience, pausing briefly on their box, as if she sensed an unseen threat. As the curtain fell for intermission, Poirot stood abruptly. "Come, Hastings, we must move quickly. There is a pattern here, a message woven into the performance. I suspect Mademoiselle Moreau uses her stage to communicate with her allies." They slipped backstage, navigating a maze of ropes, props, and harried stagehands. Poirot's demeanor was calm but purposeful, his eyes scanning every detail: a discarded script, a half-open dressing-room door, a stagehand who lingered too long near a crate of props. Hastings, ever vigilant, kept a hand near the revolver, tucked beneath his coat. In the corridor leading to Claudette's dressing room, they overheard a hushed conversation. A man's voice, low and urgent, said, "The package is ready. The Raven will deliver it tonight." A woman's voice, Claudette's, replied, "Ensure the code is secure. The fourth must not be compromised." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Raven," he murmured. "A code name, perhaps, for one of the Big Four's operatives. We are close, Hastings." They waited until the voices faded, then approached the dressing room. The door was ajar, revealing a space cluttered with costumes, makeup, and a large mirror framed in gold. On the vanity lay a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and numbers. Poirot slipped it into his pocket just as footsteps echoed down the hall. "Quickly, Hastings, behind the curtain." Poirot hissed to conceal themselves behind a heavy velvet drape as Claudette entered, her stage makeup stark under the harsh light. She moved with the grace of a panther, her eyes darting to the vanity. A flicker of alarm crossed her face as she noticed the missing notebook. "Someone's been here," she muttered, her voice laced with suspicion. She reached beneath the vanity and produced a small vial filled with a clear liquid. No matter, the plan proceeds. Poirot's mind raced. The vial poison, perhaps, a tool of blackmail or assassination. He needed to act, but confrontation now would risk alerting the Big Four. Instead, he signaled Hastings to remain hidden as Claudette left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The second half of the play began, and Poirot and Hastings returned to their box, the notebook burning a hole in Poirot's pocket. As Claudette took the stage, her performance took on a darker edge. Her character, now revealed as a master manipulator, orchestrated a betrayal that culminated in a staged poisoning. The prop wineglass she raised to her lips glittered under the spotlight, and Poirot's heart sank. "Hastings," he whispered urgently, "that glass, it is no prop. The vial from her dressing room. She means to poison someone tonight, perhaps even herself, to send a message." Hastings paled. "But who, and why here, in front of hundreds?" "To create chaos," Poirot replied. "The Big Four thrive on spectacle. A public death would sow fear and distract from their true plans. We must stop her." As the scene reached its climax, Claudette raised the glass, her eyes locking onto the audience with chilling intent. Poirot leaped from the box, his voice cutting through the theatre's hush. "Mademoiselle Moreau, Arates." The audience gasped, mistaking his interruption for part of the performance. Claudette froze, the glass inches from her lips, her composure cracking for a fleeting moment. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel, "you are bolder than I expected." "Lower the glass," Poirot commanded, striding onto the stage. The actors faltered, the audience murmuring in confusion. "That is no prop. It is poison, meant to kill." A ripple of shock spread through the theatre. Claudette's smile was icy. "You have no proof, monsieur. This is merely a performance." "Then drink," Poirot challenged, his voice steady. "Prove me wrong." For a moment, the theatre was silent, the tension palpable. Claude's eyes flickered to the wings, where a shadowy figure hesitated, then vanished. With a laugh, she set the glass down. "Very well, Monsieur you've made your point, but the show must go on." She signaled the actors to continue, but Poirot was not finished. He stepped closer, his voice low. "The notebook, mademoiselle, I have it. Your codes, your plans, they are no longer secret." Her face tightened, but she recovered quickly, bowing to the audience as if the confrontation was scripted. The curtain fell abruptly, and the house lights rose, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation. Backstage, Poirot and Hastings cornered Claudette as she attempted to flee. "You cannot stop us," she spat, her elegance giving way to defiance. "The Big Four are everywhere. You've taken my notebook, but the fourth will rise." "Who is the fourth?" Poirot demanded. "And what is the Raven's role?" Claudette laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You'll meet the Raven, soon enough, Monsieur Poirot. As for the fourth, he is untouchable." Before Poirot could press further, a stagehand burst in, shouting about a fire in the prop room. Smoke curled through the corridor, and in the chaos, Claudette slipped away. Poirot and Hastings fought through the crowd to safety, the notebook still in Poirot's possession. Outside, as firebells clanged and the Parisian night swallowed the theatre's glow, Poirot opened the notebook. Its pages revealed a web of blackmail targeting diplomats and industrialists, with Claudette as the orchestrator. One name stood out: Wilhelm Kessler, a German inventor linked to a mysterious device. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice grim. Number 3 is our next target. The actress has played her part, but the stage is set for a greater danger. To Berlin we go. Chapter 6. The actress's deception. The Parisian night shimmered with a restless energy, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant hum of jazz drifting from a nearby bistro. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat as he stepped out of a taxi onto the bustling Rue de Rivoli. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, scanned the street with a mix of excitement and unease. Poirot, Hastings murmured, his voice barely audible over the clatter of passing carriages and the chatter of evening strollers. Are you certain this actress, Claudette Moreau, is the key to unraveling the Big Four? She's a performer, not a mastermind. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Mon ami, the stage is a perfect mask for deception. A woman who can command the hearts of thousands from a spotlight can just as easily manipulate the strings of a darker plot. Claudette Moreau is no mere actress. She is number 2 of the Big Four, and tonight we shall see her true face. Their destination was the Théâtre des Étoiles, a grand old venue nestled in the heart of Paris. Its marquee glowed with golden light, announcing La Reine des Ombres, a melodrama starring the enigmatic Claudette Moreau. The play was the talk of the city, its star a vision of elegance and mystery whose performances left audiences spellbound. But Poirot's interest lay not in her artistry, but in the whispers that had reached his ears, whispers of blackmail, coded messages, and a connection to the shadowy organization that threatened global stability. That as they entered the theatre's opulent foyer, Poirot's sharp eyes darted across the crowd. Velvet-clad patrons sipped champagne, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Hastings, tugging at his tie, felt out of place among the glittering elite. This feels more like a gala than a stakeout, he muttered. Patience, Hastings, Poirot replied, his voice low. The grandeur is but a facade. Observe the details, the flicker of a glance, the tension in a smile. The truth hides in the smallest gestures. They took their seats in a private box overlooking the stage, a vantage point Poirot had secured through a discreet favor from an old friend in the Parisian police. The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose, revealing a set draped in shadows and crimson silk. Claudette Moreau appeared, her presence commanding the stage like a storm capturing the sky. Her raven hair cascaded in waves, her emerald eyes gleaming with an intensity that seemed to pierce the audience's souls. Her voice, rich and hypnotic, wove a tale of betrayal and revenge, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. Look at her hands, Hastings, he whispered, leaning forward. See how they linger on the prop dagger, how her fingers trace its edge with purpose. That is not the gesture of an actress lost in her role. That is calculation. The play unfolded, a labyrinth of intrigue that mirrored the real-life conspiracy Poirot sought to unravel. In the second act, Claudette's character delivered a monologue about a secret society controlling the fates of nations, a line that struck Poirot as more than mere coincidence. He noted the way her eyes swept the audience, pausing briefly on their box, as if she sensed an unseen threat. As the curtain fell for intermission, Poirot stood abruptly. Come, Hastings, we must move quickly. There is a pattern here, a message woven into the performance. I suspect Mademoiselle Moreau uses her stage to communicate with her allies. They slipped backstage, navigating a maze of ropes, props, and harried stagehands. Poirot's demeanor was calm but purposeful, his eyes scanning every detail: a discarded script, a half-open dressing-room door, a stagehand who lingered too long near a crate of props. Hastings, ever vigilant, kept a hand near the revolver, tucked beneath his coat. In the corridor leading to Claudette's dressing room, they overheard a hushed conversation. A man's voice, low and urgent, said, "The package is ready. The Raven will deliver it tonight." A woman's voice, Claudette's, replied, "Ensure the code is secure. The fourth must not be compromised." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Raven," he murmured, "a code name, perhaps, for one of the Big Four's operatives. We are close, Hastings." They waited until the voices faded, then approached the dressing room. The door was ajar, revealing a space cluttered with costumes, makeup, and a large mirror framed in gold. On the vanity lay a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and numbers. Poirot slipped it into his pocket just as footsteps echoed down the hall. "Quickly, Hastings, Behind the curtain, Poirot hissed. They concealed themselves behind a heavy velvet drape as Claudette entered, her stage makeup stark under the harsh light. She moved with the grace of a panther, her eyes darting to the vanity. A flicker of alarm crossed her face as she noticed the missing notebook. "Someone's been here," she muttered, her voice laced with suspicion. She reached beneath the vanity and produced a small vial filled with a clear liquid. No matter. The plan proceeds. Poirot's mind raced. The vial poison, perhaps. A tool of blackmail or assassination. He needed to act, but confrontation now would risk alerting the Big Four. Instead, he signaled Hastings to remain hidden as Claudette left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The second half of the play began, and Poirot and Hastings returned to their box, the notebook burning a hole in Poirot's pocket. As Claudette took the stage, her performance took on a darker edge. Her character, now revealed as a master manipulator, orchestrated a betrayal that culminated in a staged poisoning. The prop wineglass she raised to her lips glittered under the spotlight, and Poirot's heart sank. "Hastings," he whispered urgently, "that glass, it is no prop. The vial from her dressing room. She means to poison someone tonight, perhaps even herself, to send a message." Hastings paled. "But who? And why here, in front of hundreds?" "To create chaos," Poirot replied. "The Big Four thrive on spectacle. A public death would sow fear and distract from their true plans. We must stop her." As the scene reached its climax, Claudette raised the glass, her eyes locking onto the audience with chilling intent. Poirot leaped from the box, his voice cutting through the theatre's hush. "Mademoiselle Moreau." "Aratus," the audience gasped, mistaking his interruption for part of the performance. Claudette froze, the glass inches from her lips, her composure cracking for a fleeting moment. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel, "you are bolder than I expected." "Lower the glass," Poirot commanded, striding onto the stage. The actors faltered, the audience murmuring in confusion. "That is no prop. It is poison, meant to kill." A ripple of shock spread through the theatre. Claudette's smile was icy. "You have no proof, monsieur. This is merely a performance." "Then drink," Poirot challenged, his voice steady. "Prove me wrong." For a moment, the theatre was silent, the tension palpable. Claudette's eyes flickered to the wings, where a shadowy figure hesitated, then vanished. With a laugh, she set the glass down. "Very well, monsieur, you've made your point, but the show must go on." She signaled the actors to continue, but Poirot was not finished. He stepped closer, his voice low. "The notebook, mademoiselle. I have it. Your codes, your plans, they are no longer secret." Her face tightened, but she recovered quickly, bowing to the audience as if the confrontation was scripted. The curtain fell abruptly, and the house lights rose, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation. Backstage, Poirot and Hastings cornered Claudette as she attempted to flee. "You cannot stop us," she spat, her elegance giving way to defiance. "The Big Four are everywhere. You've taken my notebook, but the fourth will rise." "Who is the fourth?" Poirot demanded. "And what is the Raven's role?" Claudette laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You'll meet the Raven, soon enough, Monsieur Poirot. As for the fourth, he is untouchable." Before Poirot could press further, a stagehand burst in, shouting about a fire in the prop room. Smoke curled through the corridor, and in the chaos, Claudette slipped away. Poirot and Hastings fought through the crowd to safety, the notebook still in Poirot's possession. Outside, as fire bells clanged and the Parisian night swallowed the theatre's glow, Poirot opened the notebook. Its pages revealed a web of blackmail targeting diplomats and industrialists, with Claudette as the orchestrator. One name stood out: Wilhelm Kessler, a German inventor linked to a mysterious device. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice grim. "Number 3 is our next target. The actress has played her part, but the stage is set for a greater danger. To Berlin we go." Chapter 6. The actress's deception. The Parisian night shimmered with a restless energy, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant hum of jazz drifting from a nearby bistro. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat as he stepped out of a taxi onto the bustling Rue de Rive. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, scanned the street with a mix of excitement and unease. Poirot. Hastings murmured, his voice barely audible over the clatter of passing carriages and the chatter of evening strollers. "Are you certain this actress, Claudette Moreau, is the key to unraveling the Big Four. She's a performer, not a mastermind. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Mon ami, the stage is a perfect mask for deception. A woman who can command the hearts of thousands from a spotlight can just as easily manipulate the strings of a darker plot. Claudette Moreau is no mere actress, she is number 2 of the Big Four, and tonight we shall see her true face. Their destination was the Theatre des Étoiles, a grand old venue nestled in the heart of Paris. Its marquee glowed with golden light, announcing La Reine des Ombres, a melodrama starring the enigmatic Claudette Moreau. The play was the talk of the city, its star a vision of elegance and mystery, whose performances left audiences spellbound. But Poirot's interest lay not in her artistry, but in the whispers that had reached his ears, whispers of blackmail, coded messages, and a connection to the shadowy organization that threatened global stability. As they entered the theatre's opulent foyer, Poirot's sharp eyes darted across the crowd. Velvet-clad patrons sipped champagne, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Hastings, tugging at his tie, felt out of place among the glittering elite. "This feels more like a gala than a stakeout," he muttered. "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The grandeur is but a facade. Observe the details, the flicker of a glance, the tension in a smile. The truth hides in the smallest gestures." They took their seats in a private box overlooking the stage, a vantage point Poirot had secured through a discreet favor from an old friend in the Parisian police. The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose, revealing a set draped in shadows and crimson silk. Claudette Moreau appeared, her presence commanding the stage like a storm capturing the sky. Her raven hair cascaded in waves, her emerald eyes gleaming with an intensity that seemed to pierce the audience's souls. Her voice, rich and hypnotic, wove a tale of betrayal and revenge, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. "Look at her hands, Hastings," he whispered, leaning forward. "See how they linger on the prop dagger, how her fingers trace its edge with purpose. That is not the gesture of an actress lost in her role. That is calculation." The play unfolded, a labyrinth of intrigue that mirrored the real-life conspiracy Poirot sought to unravel. In the second act, Claudette's character delivered a monologue about a secret society controlling the fates of nations, a line that struck Poirot as more than mere coincidence. He noted the way her eyes swept the audience, pausing briefly on their box, as if she sensed an unseen threat. As the curtain fell for intermission, Poirot stood abruptly. "Come, Hastings, we must move quickly. There is a pattern here, a message woven into the performance. I suspect Mademoiselle Moreau uses her stage to communicate with her allies." They slipped backstage, navigating a maze of ropes, props, and harried stagehands. Poirot's demeanor was calm but purposeful, his eyes scanning every detail: a discarded script, a half-open dressing-room door, a stagehand who lingered too long near a crate of props. Hastings, ever vigilant, kept a hand near the revolver, tucked beneath his coat. In the corridor leading to Claudette's dressing room, they overheard a hushed conversation. A man's voice, low and urgent, said, "The package is ready. The Raven will deliver it tonight." A woman's voice, Claudette's, replied, "Ensure the code is secure. The fourth must not be compromised." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Raven," he murmured, "a code name, perhaps, for one of the Big Four's operatives. We are close, Hastings." They waited until the voices faded, then approached the dressing room. The door was ajar, revealing a space cluttered with costumes, makeup, and a large mirror framed in gold. On the vanity lay a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and numbers. Poirot slipped it into his pocket, just as footsteps echoed down the hall. "Quickly, Hastings." Behind the curtain, Poirot hissed. They concealed themselves behind a heavy velvet drape as Claudette entered, her stage makeup stark under the harsh light. She moved with the grace of a panther, her eyes darting to the vanity. A flicker of alarm crossed her face as she noticed the missing notebook. "Someone's been here," she muttered, her voice laced with suspicion. She reached beneath the vanity and produced a small vial filled with the clear liquid. "No matter, the plan proceeds." Poirot's mind raced. The vial, poison, perhaps, a tool of blackmail or assassination. He needed to act, but confrontation now would risk alerting the Big Four. Instead, he signaled Hastings to remain hidden as Claudette left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The second, Half of the play began, and Poirot and Hastings returned to their box, the notebook burning a hole in Poirot's pocket. As Claudette took the stage, her performance took on a darker edge. Her character, now revealed as a master manipulator, orchestrated a betrayal that culminated in a staged poisoning. The prop wineglass she raised to her lips glittered under the spotlight, and Poirot's heart sank. "Hastings," he whispered urgently, "that glass, it is no prop. The vial from her dressing room. She means to poison someone tonight, perhaps even herself, to send a message." Hastings paled. "But who? And why here, in front of hundreds?" "To create chaos," Poirot replied. "The Big Four thrive on spectacle. A public death would sow fear and distract from their true plans. We must stop her." As the scene reached its climax, Claudette raised the glass, her eyes locking onto the audience with chilling intent. Poirot leapt from the box, his voice cutting through the theatre's hush. "Mademoiselle Moreau." "Aratus," the audience gasped, mistaking his interruption for part of the performance. Claudette froze, the glass inches from her lips, her composure cracking for a fleeting moment. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel, "you are bolder than I expected." "Lower the glass," Poirot commanded, striding onto the stage. The actors faltered, the audience murmuring in confusion. "That is no prop, it is poison, meant to kill." A ripple of shock spread through the theatre. Claudette's smile was icy. "You have no proof, monsieur. This is merely a performance. Then drink." Poirot challenged, his voice steady. "Prove me wrong." For a moment, the theatre was silent, the tension palpable. Claudette's eyes flickered to the wings, where a shadowy figure hesitated, then vanished. With a laugh, she set the glass down. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot, you've made your point, but the show must go on." She signaled the actors to continue, but Poirot was not finished. He stepped closer, his voice low. "The notebook, mademoiselle. I have it. Your codes, your plans, they are no longer secret." Her face tightened, but she recovered quickly, bowing to the audience, as if the confrontation was scripted. The curtain fell abruptly, and the house lights rose, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation. Backstage, Poirot and Hastings cornered Claudette as she attempted to flee. "You cannot stop us," she spat, her elegance giving way to defiance. "The Big Four are everywhere. You've taken my notebook, but the fourth will rise." "Who is the fourth?" Poirot demanded. "And what is the Raven's role?" Claudette laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You'll meet the Raven, soon enough, Monsieur Poirot. As for the fourth, he is untouchable." Before Poirot could press further, a stagehand burst in, shouting about a fire in the prop room. Smoke curled through the corridor, and in the chaos, Claudette slipped away. Poirot and Hastings fought through the crowd to safety, the notebook still in Poirot's possession. Outside, as fire bells clanged and the Parisian night swallowed the theatre's glow, Poirot opened the notebook. Its pages revealed a web of blackmail targeting diplomats and industrialists, with Claudette as the orchestrator. One name stood out: Wilhelm Kessler, a German inventor linked to a mysterious device. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice grim. "Number 3 is our next target. The actress has played her part, but the stage is set for a greater danger. To Berlin we go." Chapter 6. The Actress's Deception. The Parisian night shimmered with a restless energy, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant hum of jazz drifting from a nearby bistro. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat as he stepped out of a taxi onto the bustling Rue de. Beside him, Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, scanned the street with a mix of excitement and unease. "Poirot," Hastings murmured, his voice barely audible over the clatter of passing carriages and the chatter of evening strollers. "Are you certain this actress, Claudette Moreau, is the key to unraveling the Big Four? She's a performer, not a mastermind." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mon ami, the stage is a perfect mask for deception. A woman who can command the hearts of thousands from a spotlight can just as easily manipulate the strings of a darker plot. Claudette Moreau is no mere actress, she is number 2 of the Big Four, and tonight we shall see her true face." Their destination was the Théâtre des Étoiles, a grand old venue nestled in the heart of Paris. Its marquee glowed with golden light, announcing La Reine des Ombres, a melodrama starring the enigmatic Claudette Moreau. The play was the talk of the city, its star a vision of elegance and mystery whose performances left audiences spellbound. But Poirot's interest lay not in her artistry, but in the whispers that had reached his ears, whispers of blackmail, coded messages, and a connection to the shadowy organization that threatened global stability. As they entered the theater's opulent foyer, Poirot's sharp eyes darted across the crowd. Velvet-clad patrons sipped champagne, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of a string quartet. Hastings, tugging at his tie, felt out of place among the glittering elite. "This feels more like a gala than a stakeout," he muttered. "Patience, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "The grandeur is but a facade. Observe the details, the flicker of a glance, the tension in his smile. The truth hides in the smallest gestures." They took their seats in a private box overlooking the stage, a vantage point Poirot had secured through a discreet favor from an old friend in the Parisian police. The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose, revealing a set draped in shadows and crimson silk. Claudette Moreau appeared, her presence commanding the stage like a storm capturing the sky. Her raven hair cascaded in waves, her emerald eyes gleaming with an intensity that seemed to pierce the audience's souls. Her voice, rich and hypnotic, wove a tale of betrayal and revenge, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. "Look at her hands, Hastings," he whispered, leaning forward. "See how they linger on the prop dagger, how her fingers trace its edge with purpose. That is not the gesture of an actress lost in her role. That is calculation." The play unfolded, a labyrinth of intrigue that mirrored the real-life conspiracy Poirot sought to unravel. In the second act, Claudette's character delivered a monologue about a secret society controlling the fates of nations, a line that struck Poirot as more than mere coincidence. He noted the way her eyes swept the audience, pausing briefly on their box, as if she sensed an unseen threat. As the curtain fell for intermission, Poirot stood abruptly. "Come, Hastings. We must move quickly. There is a pattern here, a message woven into the performance. I suspect Mademoiselle Moreau uses her stage to communicate with her allies." They slipped backstage, navigating a maze of ropes, props, and harried stagehands. Poirot's demeanor was calm but purposeful, his eyes scanning every detail of discarded script, a half-open dressing-room door, a stagehand who lingered too long near a crate of props. Hastings, ever vigilant, kept a hand near the revolver, tucked beneath his coat. In the corridor leading to Claudette's dressing room, they overheard a hushed conversation. A man's voice, low and urgent, said, "The package is ready. The Raven will deliver it tonight." A woman's voice, Claudette's, "Ensure the code is secure. The fourth must not be compromised." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Raven," he murmured, "a code name, perhaps, for one of the Big Four's operatives." "We are close, Hastings." They waited until the voices faded, then approached the dressing room. The door was ajar, revealing a space cluttered with costumes, makeup, and a large mirror framed in gold. On the vanity lay a small leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and numbers. Poirot slipped it into his pocket, just as footsteps echoed down the hall. "Quickly, Hastings." "Behind the curtain," Poirot hissed. They concealed themselves behind a heavy velvet drape as Claudette entered, her stage makeup stark under the harsh light. She moved with the grace of a panther, her eyes darting to the vanity. A flicker of alarm crossed her face as she noticed the missing notebook. "Someone's been here," she muttered, her voice laced with suspicion. She reached beneath the vanity and produced a small vial filled with a clear liquid. "No matter, the plan proceeds." Poirot's mind raced. The vial poison, perhaps, a tool of blackmail or assassination. He needed to act, but confrontation now would risk alerting the Big Four. Instead, he signaled Hastings to remain hidden as Claudette left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The second half of the play began, and Poirot and Hastings returned to their box, the notebook burning a hole in Poirot's pocket. As Claudette took the stage, her performance took on a darker edge. Her character, now revealed as a master manipulator, orchestrated a betrayal that culminated in a staged poisoning. The prop wineglass she raised to her lips glittered under the spotlight, and Poirot's heart sank. "Hastings," he whispered urgently, "that glass, it is no prop. The vial from her dressing room. She means to poison someone tonight, perhaps even herself, to send a message." Hastings paled. "But who? And why here, in front of hundreds?" To create chaos, Poirot replied. The Big Four thrive on spectacle. A public death would sow fear and distract from their true plans. We must stop her. As the scene reached its climax, Claudette raised the glass, her eyes locking onto the audience with chilling intent. Poirot leapt from the box, his voice cutting through the theatre's hush. Mademoiselle Moreau, Arates, the audience gasped, mistaking his interruption for part of the performance. Claudette froze, the glass inches from her lips, her composure cracking for a fleeting moment. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel, you are bolder than I expected. Lower the glass, Poirot commanded, striding onto the stage. The actors faltered, the audience murmuring in confusion. That is no prop, it is poison, meant to kill. A ripple of shock spread through the theatre. Claudette's smile was icy. You have no proof, monsieur. This is merely a performance. Then drink, Poirot challenged, his voice steady. Prove me wrong. For a moment, the theatre was silent, the tension palpable. Claudette's eyes flickered to the wings, where a shadowy figure hesitated, then vanished. With a laugh, she set the glass down. Very well, Monsieur Poirot. You've made your point, but the show must go on. She signaled the actors to continue, but Poirot was not finished. He stepped closer, his voice low. The notebook, mademoiselle, I have it. Your codes, your plans, they are no longer secret. Her face tightened, but she recovered quickly, bowing to the audience as if the confrontation was scripted. The curtain fell abruptly, and the house lights rose, leaving the crowd buzzing with speculation. Backstage, Poirot and Hastings cornered Claudette as she attempted to flee. You cannot stop us, she spat, her elegance giving way to defiance. The Big Four are everywhere. You've taken my notebook, but the fourth will rise. Who is the fourth? Poirot demanded. And what is the Raven's role? Claudette laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You'll meet the Raven, soon enough, Monsieur Poirot. As for the fourth, he is untouchable. Before Poirot could press further, a stagehand burst in, shouting about a fire in the prop room. Smoke curled through the corridor, and in the chaos, Claudette slipped away. Poirot and Hastings fought through the crowd to safety. The notebook still in Poirot's possession. Outside, as fire bells clanged, and the Parisian night swallowed the theatre's glow, Poirot opened the notebook. Its pages revealed a web of blackmail targeting diplomats and industrialists, with Claudette as the orchestrator. One name stood out, Wilhelm Kessler, a German inventor linked to a mysterious device. Hastings, Poirot, said, his voice grim. Number 3 is our next target. The actress has played her part, but the stage is set for a greater danger. To Berlin we go. Chapter 9. The train to nowhere. The Orient Express roared through the night, its steel wheels singing a relentless rhythm against the tracks as it carved a path across the European continent. Hercule Poirot sat in the dimly lit dining car, his gloved fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain teacup, his sharp eyes scanning the passengers with the precision of a hawk. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood, cigar smoke, and the faint tank of anticipation. Captain Hastings, seated across from him, fidgeted with his napkin, his brow furrowed beneath the brim of his travelling cap. Poirot, are you certain this is the right train? Hastings whispered, his voice barely audible over the clink of silverware and the murmur of conversation. After Venice, I'd have thought the Big Four would avoid something as public as the Orient Express. Poirot's moustache twitched, a glimmer of amusement in his green eyes. Mon ami, the Big Four thrive on audacity. They hide in plain sight, using the grandeur of this train as a stage for their machinations. I'll lead from New York the list of operatives pointed us here, to a meeting aboard this very train. We must be vigilant. The list secured from the Tycoon's art collection in New York had revealed a coded message, a rendezvous on the Orient Express, where an operative of the Big Four would deliver critical instructions to destabilize Europe's railway network. Poirot had deduced that the plot involved sabotage, potentially targeting the train itself, and the stakes were higher than ever. The Big Four's web was tightening, and Poirot intended to cut its threads before it ensnared them. The dining car was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers swayed gently with the train's motion, their light casting prismatic glints across velvet upholstery and mahogany paneling. Passengers in evening dress conversed in hushed tones, their faces a mix of boredom and intrigue. A Russian countess in a fur stole sipped champagne, her diamond earrings catching the light. A German industrialist puffed on a cigar, his laughter booming. A young woman in a sapphire gown sat alone, her gloved hands folded over a leather-bound book, her eyes darting nervously to the door. Poirot leaned closer to Hastings. "Observe, mon ami, the lady in blue, she is too still, too watchful. And the waiter, the one with the scar above his brow, he moves too deliberately, as if counting his steps. We are surrounded by players in this drama, but which one is our quarry?" Hastings frowned, his gaze flickering to the waiter, who was now polishing a glass with excessive care. "You think the waiter is one of them? He looks ordinary enough." "Ordinary is the perfect disguise, Hastings. The big four do not wear their villainy on their sleeves. They are the shadow in the crowd, the whisper in the silence. We must watch and wait." The train lurched slightly, a momentary jolt that sent a ripple of unease through the dining car. Glasses clinked, and the Countess's champagne sloshed onto her glove. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his hand steadying his teacup. "That was no mere bump, mon ami. Something is amiss." Before Hastings could respond, the dining car's door slid open with a hiss, and a man in a conductor's uniform entered, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice trembling, "there has been an incident in the baggage car. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." The passengers erupted into murmurs, but Poirot was already on his feet, his cane tapping a purposeful rhythm as he moved toward the conductor. "Monsieur, I am Hercule Poirot, a detective of some renown. What is this incident you speak of?" The conductor's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Monsieur Poirot, it's not safe to discuss here. Please, come with me." Hastings followed, his hand resting on the revolver tucked beneath his jacket. They moved through the swaying corridors, past compartments where passengers peered out with anxious faces. The baggage car was at the rear of the train, its heavy door ajar, letting in a draft of cold night air. Inside, the scene was chaos. Crates had been overturned, their contents silks, furs, and leather cases spilled across the floor. In the center lay a man, his throat slashed, a crimson pool spreading beneath him. A single piece of paper, marked with the now familiar quatre, was pinned to his chest with a dagger. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers brushing the paper without disturbing it. "A courier," he murmured. He was carrying something vital, and the big four ensured he would not deliver it. Hastings swallowed hard, his stomach churning. "Good Lord, Poirot, they're killing their own people now." "Non, mon ami." This man was no ally of theirs. He was a threat, perhaps a defector, or someone who knew too much. "The big four are ruthless, even with their own." The conductor wrung his hands. "Monsieur Poirot, we cannot stop the train, it's too dangerous, with snow on the tracks ahead. But if there is a killer aboard..." Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. "Then we must find them before they strike again. Tell me, monsieur, who had access to this car?" The conductor hesitated. "Only the crew, and, well, a few passengers who requested to check their luggage earlier. A woman in a blue gown, a German gentleman, and a young man with a limp." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The lady in blue, Bean. Return to your duties, monsieur, but say nothing of this to the passengers. Discretion is our ally." As the conductor hurried away, Poirot turned to Hastings. "We return to the dining car, mon ami. The lady in blue is our key, but we must tread carefully. The big four are watching, and they will not hesitate to kill again." Back in the dining car, the atmosphere had shifted. The passengers' earlier gaiety had given way to tension, their eyes darting to the doors as whispers of the incident spread. The lady in blue was still at her table, her book now closed, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm. Poirot approached, his manner charming but calculated. "Madame," he said, bowing slightly, "forgive my intrusion, but I could not help but notice your exquisite taste in literature. Might I inquire about your book?" Her eyes, a striking shade of amber, met his with a flicker of suspicion. "It's a collection of poetry," she said, her voice smooth but guarded. "Nothing of interest to a stranger." "On the contrary," Poirot replied, sliding into the seat opposite her. "I find everything interesting, especially on a train where secrets travel faster than the locomotive. Tell me, have you visited the baggage car this evening?" Her fingers froze, and for a moment her composure slipped. "Why would you ask such a thing?" she said, her tone sharp. Before Poirot could press further, the dining car's lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. A woman screamed, and the sound of shattering glass followed. Hastings leaped to his feet, his revolver drawn. but the darkness was absolute. When the lights returned moments later, the lady in blue was gone, her book abandoned on the table. "Blasted Poirot!" Hastings exclaimed, scanning the room. She slipped away. Poirot picked up the book, flipping it open to reveal a hollowed-out compartment. Inside was a small metal cylinder, its surface etched with the number 4. He twisted it open, revealing a tightly rolled parchment covered in cryptic symbols. "A code," he murmured, "and a message meant for someone on this train." The dining car was now in an uproar, passengers demanding answers. Poirot slipped the cylinder into his pocket and gestured for Hastings to follow. "We must search the train, mon ami. The lady in blue is no ordinary passenger. She is an operative, and she is not alone." They moved through the train, compartment by compartment, Poirot's keen senses attuned to every detail. A half-empty glass of wine in one cabin, a cigarette but still smouldering in another, a faint scratch on a doorframe that suggested forced entry. In the third-class carriage, they found the young man with a limp, his face pale and his hands trembling as he clutched a battered suitcase. "Monsieur Poirot," said, his voice calm but commanding, "you seem distressed. Perhaps you can tell me what you know of the baggage car." The young man's eyes widened, and he bolted, shoving past Hastings and sprinting toward the rear of the train. Poirot and Hastings gave chase, their footsteps pounding against the narrow corridor. The young man reached the coupling between cars, where the wind howled and the tracks blurred below. He turned, a knife glinting in his hand, his face twisted with desperation. "Stay back," he shouted. "You don't know what you're meddling with." Poirot raised his hands, his voice steady. "Monsieur, you are no killer. You are afraid. Tell me who you work for, and I can protect you." The young man's hand shook, the knife wavering. "They'll kill me," he whispered. "The Big Four. They see everything." Before Poirot could respond, a shadow moved behind the young man, a figure in a dark coat, face obscured by a scarf. A silenced pistol flashed, and the young man collapsed, a bullet in his back. The figure vanished into the next carriage, leaving Poirot and Hastings stunned. After them, Poirot barked, his usual composure fraying. They pursued, but the train's layout was a maze, and the assassin was swift. They reached the observation car, its panoramic windows revealing a snow-dusted landscape rushing past. The lady in blue stood at the far end, her gown replaced by a practical traveling coat, a pistol in her hand. "You're persistent, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cold. "But you're too late. The message has been delivered, and the railways will fall." Poirot stepped forward, his cane tapping softly. "Madame, you underestimate Hercule Poirot. Your message, your code, is in my possession, and you will tell me who your master is." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You think you've won. The Big Four have eyes everywhere. Even now, they're watching." A sudden jolt rocked the train, the screech of metal on metal deafening. The observation car shuddered, and Poirot grabbed Hastings to steady him. "Sabotage!" Poirot shouted. "They mean to derail us." The lady in blue seized the moment, firing a shot that grazed Hastings' shoulder. He grunted, clutching the wound, but Poirot was already moving, tackling her to the floor. The pistol skidded across the car, and Poirot pinned her arms, his strength surprising for his small frame. "Hastings, the controls!" Poirot yelled. "Find the engineer." Hastings staggered to his feet, blood seeping through his jacket, and ran toward the front of the train. The corridors were chaos, passengers screaming as the train lurched again. He reached the engine room, where the engineer lay unconscious, a wrench beside him. The controls were sabotaged, the throttle jammed at full speed. Hastings, drawing on his military training, worked frantically to slow the train, pulling levers and cutting power. Back in the observation car, Poirot bound the lady in blue with his belt, her struggles futile. "Madame, you will talk," he said, his voice like ice. "Who is your contact? What is the plan?" She glared at him, her amber eyes defiant. "You'll never stop them. The railways are just the beginning. Europe will burn." The train slowed, its momentum fading as Hastings' efforts paid off. Poirot dragged the woman to her feet, his mind racing. The code in the cylinder was still a mystery, but it was clear the sabotage was meant to disrupt more than just this train. It was a test, a prelude to a larger catastrophe. When the train finally stopped, snow swirling around its halted form, Poirot and Hastings handed the lady in blue to the authorities waiting at the next station. The cylinder and its code were safely in Poirot's possession, and the young man's body was recovered. his suitcase revealing a map marked with railway junctions across Europe. As they sat in a quiet compartment, Hastings nursing his wound, Poirot studied the map. "The Big Four are planning chaos, mon ami," he said, his voice low. "This map points to London, to a hub where their next move will unfold. We have thwarted their sabotage, but the war is far from over." Hastings managed a weak smile. "At least we're still alive, Poirot. That's something." Poirot's eyes gleamed. And while we live, we fight. The Big Four may have eyes everywhere, but they cannot escape the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot." The train stood, silent in the snow, its passengers safe for now, but the shadow of the Big Four loomed larger than ever, their next move waiting in the fog of London. Chapter 10. The Fog of London. The fog rolled through London's streets like a living thing, thick and grey, swallowing lamplights and muffling the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. It was November, and the city seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the weight of secrets stirring in the haze. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his Baker Street flat, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of a single lamp. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the sill, a metronome to his racing thoughts. Captain Hastings slumped in an armchair, nursing a brandy, his face etched with the exhaustion of their global chase. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice rough, "this fog, it's like the city's conspiring against us. How are we to find anything in this murk?" Poirot turned, his eyes glinting with purpose. "The fog, mon ami, is both a cloak and a canvas. It hides our enemies, yes, but it also reveals their desperation. The Big Four are tightening their grip, and London is their latest stage. We must move swiftly." Their return to London had been prompted by a cryptic telegram from Inspector Japp, urging them to investigate a series of murders that bore the chilling hallmark of the Big Four, each victim marked with a small, embossed 4 on a scrap of paper tucked into their pockets. The victims, a banker, a journalist, and a minor peer, seemed unconnected. Yet Poirot's little grey cells sensed a pattern, a thread weaving through the chaos. The first murder had occurred 3 nights prior, in Whitechapel. The banker, found slumped in an alley, his throat cut with surgical precision. The second, a journalist, was discovered in Hyde Park, poisoned, her notebook missing. The third, a peer, had been strangled in his Mayfair townhouse, his safe ransacked. Each crime scene was meticulous, almost theatrical, as if the killer wanted Poirot to notice. "These are not random acts," Poirot had declared after inspecting the peer's body, his gloved fingers tracing the embossed 4 on the note. "They are messages, Hastings. The Big Four are taunting us, daring us to unravel their purpose." Now, as the fog thickened, a new lead emerged. Japp had uncovered whispers of a secret society meeting at a derelict warehouse in the East End, a place known as the Ironworks. Rumors swirled of a gathering tied to the Big Four, a conclave to finalize a plot that could topple governments. Poirot, never one too shy from danger, insisted they infiltrate the meeting. The streets of Whitechapel were a labyrinth of shadows, the fog so dense that Poirot and Hastings moved by sound as much as sight. The creak of a cart, the distant shout of a newsboy, the drip of water from sagging eaves. They wore plain coats to blend with the dockworkers and costermongers, but Poirot's fastidious nature betrayed him. He winced each time his polished shoes sank into the muddy cobbles. "Stay alert, Hastings," Poirot murmured as they approached the Ironworks, its rusted gates looming like the jaws of some forgotten beast. "The Big Four do not gather lightly. This is no mere meeting, it is a council of war." The warehouse was a hulking relic of London's industrial past, its windows boarded, its walls streaked with soot. A faint glow seeped through the cracks, and muffled voices carried on the damp air. Poirot pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Hastings to follow as he slipped through a side door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of oil and decay. Crates were stacked haphazardly, creating a maze of shadows. At the far end, a circle of figures stood around a makeshift table, their faces obscured by hoods. A single lantern cast flickering light, illuminating a map spread before them. Europe, marked with red pins like drops of blood. Poirot crouched behind a crate, his eyes narrowing as he strained to hear. The leader, a tall figure with a voice like gravel, spoke in clipped tones. "The documents are secure. The coup begins at dawn. Whitehall will fall before they know what hit them." Hastings gripped Poirot's arm, his whisper urgent. "A coup, Poirot. We can't let this happen." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice barely audible. "We must know their plan before we strike." The leader continued, gesturing to a stack of papers on the table. "The forgeries are flawless. Ministers will sign, believing they act for king and country. By the time the truth emerges, the Big Four will hold the reins." Poirot's mind raced. Forged documents, a political coup. This was the Big Four's boldest move yet. But who were the targets? And how could they execute such a plan under the nose of Scotland Yard? He needed those papers. A sudden noise crate shifting behind them sent the room into chaos. One of the hooded figures spun, drawing a pistol. "We're not alone," he barked. "Run!" Poirot hissed, pulling Hastings toward a side passage. Bullets ricocheted off the walls as they sprinted through the maze, the shouts of their pursuers echoing. The fog outside was their salvation, swallowing them as they burst through a rusted door into an alley. They didn't stop until they reached a shuttered pub, its sign creaking in the wind. Hastings panted, his face pale. That was too close. "Poirot, what now?" "Now," Poirot said, his breath steady despite the chase. "We summoned Jap. The ironworks must be raided, and those documents secured." By midnight, Jap had assembled a squad of constables, their lanterns cutting through the fog like knives. The raid was swift and brutal. The warehouse, now deserted, yielded its secrets, a cache of forged documents, letters, treaties, and orders designed to impersonate government directives. Each bore the seal of a prominent minister, but the signatures were false, crafted to authorize troop movements and financial transfers that would plunge Britain into chaos. That as Jap's men sifted through the papers, Poirot examined a single sheet, its ink still fresh. It was a letter, ostensibly from the Home Secretary, ordering the arrest of key MPs. The embossed 4 at the corner confirmed its origin. "This is their weapon," Poirot said, his voice grim. "Not bombs or bullets, but lies. They seek to turn Britain's own machinery against her." Jap, his face haggard, nodded. "We've arrested 3 of the conspirators' small fry, but they're talking. They claim the orders came from a man called the Architect." "Sound like your number 1, perhaps," Poirot said, his mind already elsewhere. The Architect was a new name, but it fit the shadow of Li Chang-yen, the elusive mastermind of the Big Four. Yet something nagged at him, a detail from the warehouse, a fleeting glimpse of a figure who moved with too much grace, too much purpose. The fog had lifted slightly by dawn, revealing a city on edge. News of the thwarted coup spread, but Poirot knew the battle was far from over. The captured operatives had revealed the name Don Vincenzo, a Sicilian mafioso linked to the Big Four. The trail led south, to the sun-scorched cliffs of Sicily, where the next piece of the puzzle awaited. As Poirot and Hastings boarded a train for Dover, the detective's thoughts lingered on the fog, on the secrets it had hidden and revealed. The Big Four were wounded, their plans disrupted, but number 1 remained a phantom. Poirot's fingers brushed the forged letter in his pocket, its weight a reminder of the stakes. The game was far from over, but Hercule Poirot was ready for the next move. Chapter 11. The Sicilian Gambit. The Sicilian sun blazed over the rugged cliffs of Taormina, casting long shadows across the ancient ruins that clung to the hills. Hercule Poirot, his Panama hat tilted against the glare, surveyed the landscape with a discerning eye. His polished shoes, dusted with the island's volcanic soil, seemed out of place among the crumbling stones of the Teatro Greco, where tourists milled about, unaware of the deadly game unfolding in their midst. Beside him, Captain Hastings mopped his brow, his linen suit creased from the heat and their perilous journey. "Poirot," Hastings said, squinting at the azure Ionian Sea below, "this place feels like a trap. How do we know the Big Four's mafia connection is even here?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Mon ami, Sicily is a land of secrets, where the past whispers to the present. The Big Four's web extends here, to a man named Salvatore Greco a Capo, with ties to number 1. The list from New York pointed us to him, and his shadow looms over this island." Their pursuit of the Big Four had led them to Sicily, driven by the coded letters recovered from Cornelius Drake's safe. One letter, marked with a stylized 4, mentioned Greco, a mafia don whose influence stretched from Palermo to the eastern coast. Greco was no ordinary criminal. He was a linchpin in the Big Four's operations, funneling dirty money through Sicily's black market. The letters hinted at his involvement in a plot targeting a peace conference in Geneva, scheme Poirot was determined to foil. Their lead was a meeting at the ruins of an ancient villa near Syracuse, where Greco was rumored to oversee a clandestine exchange. The journey to Syracuse was a study in contrasts. Dusty roads lined with olive groves gave way to bustling markets, where vendors hawked figs and pistachios under striped awnings. Poirot and Hastings traveled by a rattling Fiat, driven by a local contact named Marco, a wiry ex-carabiniere, with a scar across his cheek. Marco's eyes darted nervously as he spoke, his voice low. "Greco's men are everywhere," Marco warned, navigating a hairpin turn. "They call him Il Falco the Hawk. He sees everything. You sure you want to poke this nest?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "Monsieur Marco, a hawk may soar, but even he cannot escape the hunter's net." We proceed. They arrived at the villa's ruins at dusk, the sky streaked with crimson. The site was a labyrinth of weathered columns and moss-covered arches, its solitude broken only by the chirp of cicadas. Marco stayed with the car, his hand on a pistol, while Poirot and Hastings ventured into the ruins. The air was thick with the scent of wild thyme, and the fading light cast eerie shadows across the stones. "Stay sharp, Hastings," Poirot whispered, his cane tapping softly. "We are not alone." They crouched behind a fallen pillar, watching as figures emerged from the shadows. 3 men, dressed in dark suits despite the heat, stood in a clearing. One, broad-shouldered with a hawk-like nose, was unmistakably Salvatore Greco. His companions carried leather satchels, their movements tense. A 4th figure approached a woman in a hooded cloak, her face obscured. "That's her," Hastings hissed. "The one from New York." Alina. Poirot shook his head. "Nan, mon ami, this is another." The big 4 play their pieces carefully. The woman handed Greco a sealed envelope, her voice a low murmur. "The shipment is secure. Geneva is next. Number 1 expects no mistakes." Greco's laugh was a guttural rasp. "Tell Li Changyen his gold is safe. My men will handle the conference." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Li Changyen number 1 confirmed at last. But before he could signal Hastings, a twig snapped underfoot. The group froze, and Greco's hand shot to a holster beneath his jacket. "Who's there?" he barked, his voice echoing off the ruins. Hastings cursed under his breath, but Poirot was already moving, stepping into the open with an air of calm authority. "Buonasera, signore, Greco," he said, his accent impeccable. "A fine evening for a stroll among history." Nan. Greco's eyes narrowed, his hand still on his gun. "You're no tourist. Who are you?" "Hercule Poirot, at your service," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "And you, I presume, are the Hawk of Sicily, weaving webs for the Big 4. The woman in the cloak gasped, but Greco silenced her with a glance. "You're bold, little man, but you're in my world now." Before Poirot could respond, one of Greco's men lunged, a knife glinting in the moonlight. Hastings tackled the man, sending them both crashing into a pile of stones. Chaos erupted. Greco drew his pistol. The woman fled, and the second guard charged Poirot. The detective sidestepped with surprising agility, tripping the guard with his cane. Hastings grappled with his opponent, landing a solid punch before pinning him down. Greco fired a shot into the air, freezing the scene. "Enough," he roared. "You think you can walk into my domain and live? Tell me why I shouldn't kill you now." Poirot, unfazed, adjusted his hat. "Because, signore, you are a businessman, and I have something you value more than blood, a secret that could unravel your empire." Greco's smirk was cold. "You bluff, do I?" Poirot said, producing a folded paper from his pocket. A photocopy of Drake's list, carefully edited to omit key names. "This lists your associates, your routes, your accounts. One call to the Carabinieri, and your hawk's wings are clipped." Greco's face darkened, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "You're lying. No one could have that." "Then test me," Poirot said, stepping closer. "Ask me about the gold shipment to Geneva, or the safe house in Palermo, or the name of your contact in Shanghai Wei. Was it?" The mention of Wei stopped Greco cold. He lowered his gun, his voice a growl. "What do you want?" "Information," Poirot said. "The Geneva conference. What is the Big Four's plan?" Greco hesitated, then laughed bitterly. "You'd think I'd betray number 1. You're a fool, Poirot." Before Poirot could press further, a low hum filled the aerodrome. Its red lights blinking in the night sky. It swooped low, dropping a small canister that burst into flames. The ruins became an inferno, forcing Poirot and Hastings to dive for cover. Greco and his men vanished into the smoke, leaving the satchels behind. "Blast it, Poirot," Hastings coughed, shielding his face. "Was that their backup?" Nan, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the flames. "That was a warning too. Greco, not us. Someone else watches the board." They scrambled to retrieve the satchels before the fire consumed them. Inside, they found forged passports, coded maps, and a single photograph. A Geneva hotel, marked with a red circle. Poirot's mind raced. The conference was the target, and time was running out. As they fled the ruins, Marco's Fiat screeched to a halt. "Get in," he shouted, his face pale. "Greco's men are coming." The car sped through the night, weaving past olive groves and coastal cliffs. In the back seat, Poirot examined the photograph, his fingers tracing the red circle. "The Hotel des Nations," he murmured. "The peace conference. They plan an attack." Hastings, nursing a bruised jaw, leaned forward. "But who sent that drone?" "Another of the Big Four." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. "Or perhaps a rival within their ranks." The web phrase, "mon ami." They reached a safe house in Catania, a nondescript apartment overlooking the harbor. There, under the flicker of a single bulb, Poirot and Hastings pored over their findings. The maps detailed smuggling routes, but the photograph was the clear blueprint for chaos. The conference was days away, and the Big Four's plan was clear: a strike to destabilize global alliances. As dawn broke, painting Mount Etna's silhouette in gold, Poirot closed the satchel. "We go to Geneva," he said, his voice resolute. "Greco has shown us the path. The Sicilian gambit has failed, but the game grows deadlier." Chapter 12. The Geneva Deception. The city of Geneva sparkled under a late autumn sun, its lake reflecting the jagged peaks of the Alps like a mirror of secrets. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and the murmur of diplomats converging on the Palais des Nations for a historic peace conference. Hercule Poirot, disguised as a Belgian delegate in a crisp grey suit and false spectacles, moved through the crowd with the precision of a chess master. Beside him, Captain Hastings, sporting a neatly trimmed beard to mask his identity, adjusted his tie nervously. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, his voice muffled by the chatter of ambassadors and the clink of champagne flutes. "This place is a fortress. How could the Big Four smuggle a bomb in here?" Poirot's eyes, sharp behind the tinted lenses, scanned the grand hall. Marble columns soared to a vaulted ceiling, and crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the sea of tailored suits and elegant gowns. "Mon ami," he replied softly, "the Big Four do not rely on brute force. Their weapon is subtlety, bomb hidden not in a crate, but in plain sight, cloaked in the trappings of diplomacy." Their mission was dire. A tip from a captured operative in Sicily had revealed the Big Four's boldest scheme yet: an assassination plot targeting world leaders at the conference. The mastermind, number 1 Li Changyen, was still in hiding, but his shadow loomed over Geneva. Poirot's task was to find the bomb and expose the plot before it could plunge the world into chaos. The conference hall buzzed with anticipation as delegates settled into their seats. Poirot, clutching a leather portfolio stamped with the seal of a fictitious Belgian ministry, took his place near the front, where he could observe the dais. Hastings, posing as his aide, lingered at the back, ready to act on Poirot's signal. The agenda was a delicate dance of negotiations, but Poirot's focus was on the gifts presented to each leader, a tradition of the conference, and a perfect opportunity for sabotage. That's the opening speeches began. Poirot's gaze settled on a table laden with diplomatic gifts, ornate boxes, silver pens, and crystal decanters, each wrapped in silk and ribbon. One item caught his argile-lacquered wooden box, inlaid with mother-of pearl, presented to the French delegate. Its intricate design was exquisite, but something about its weight, the way it sat slightly askew, set Poirot's little grey cells alight. "Hastings," he murmured into a concealed earpiece, a discreet device borrowed from a contact in British intelligence, "observe the lacquered box on the gift table. It is too heavy for its size. We must examine it." Hastings, stationed near a marble pillar, nodded subtly. "I'll get closer, but there's security everywhere. How do we get to it without causing a scene?" "Patience, mon ami. We wait for the recess. The Big Four rely on distraction. Let us use their own chaos against them." The speeches droned on, a symphony of platitudes about unity and peace. Poirot's mind, however, was a whirlwind of calculation. He noted the movements of the staff, the glances exchanged between minor delegates, and the faint sheen of sweat on the forehead of a young attaché who seemed overly attentive to the gift table. The man's nervous fidgeting, the way his hands lingered near his pocket, marked him as a potential operative. When the session broke for a brief recess, the hall erupted into controlled chaos. Delegates mingled, aides scurried, and Poirot seized his chance. He approached the gift table, his demeanor that of a curious diplomat. The lacquered box gleamed under the chandelier's light, its surface etched with a dragon motif, a subtle nod to Li Changyen. Perhaps magnificent craftsmanship, Poirot remarked to a nearby aide, his accent thickened for effect. May I inspect it closer? The aide, a dour man with a clipped mustache, hesitated. It's for the French delegate, monsieur, not to be handled. Of course, Poirot said, bowing slightly. But as the aide turned away, Poirot's nimble fingers brushed the box, feeling a faint vibration, a mechanical hum, almost imperceptible. His heart quickened. This was no ordinary gift. Hastings, he whispered into the earpiece, the box contains a device. We must act now. Hastings, weaving through the crowd, reached the table just as the young attaché from earlier approached. The man's hand darted toward the box, but Hastings, with a clumsy feigned stumble, knocked a tray of glasses to the floor. The crash drew every eye, and in the confusion, Poirot slipped the box into his portfolio, replacing it with a similar one he'd prepared a sleight of hand, perfected years ago in Brussels. "Pardon, monsieur," Hastings exclaimed, playing the bumbling aide as security rushed over. The attaché, flustered, retreated into the crowd, and Poirot made his way to a secluded corridor. The box heavy in his hands, in a quiet alcove. Poirot opened the box with the precision of a surgeon. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a device unlike any he'd seen, a compact sphere of polished steel, its surface etched with tiny circuits and a blinking red light. A timer, set to detonate in less than an hour. Wires snaked from the sphere to a small vial of clear liquid, likely a chemical catalyst, designed to amplify the explosion. "Hastings," Poirot said, as his friend joined him, "this is no ordinary bomb. It is a work of art, designed to kill silently and efficiently. The Big Four mean to make a statement. Can you disarm it?" Hastings asked, his voice tight. Poirot's fingers danced over the device, his mind racing through possibilities. "It is complex, but not impossible. The key is the timing mechanism. If I can interrupt the circuit without triggering the catalyst." He worked swiftly, using a penknife to pry open a panel. The wires were a maze, but Poirot's logic was unerring. He traced the primary circuit, isolating the timer's power source. Sweat beaded on his brow as the red light flickered, then steadied. With a final snip, the light went out, and the device fell silent. "Mon Dieu," Poirot breathed, leaning back. "It is done." But the danger was far from over. The attaché, now aware of the missing box, was whispering urgently to a group of men near the hall's entrance. Poirot recognized one of them, a tall figure with a scar across his cheek, a known operative of the Big Four from their encounter in Venice. "Hastings, we must find the attaché. He is our link to Li Changyen." They re-entered the hall, blending into the crowd as the conference resumed. Poirot's eyes locked onto the attaché, who was slipping toward a side exit. With a nod to Hastings, they followed, navigating a labyrinth of corridors until they reached a service stairwell. The attaché was there, speaking into a radio in hushed tones. ... "The box is gone." Someone interfered. "We need to evacuate." Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the stairwell's echo. "Monsieur, your plan has failed. The bomb is disarmed, and your masters will not be pleased." The attaché spun, his hand reaching for a concealed weapon, but Hastings was faster, pinning him against the wall. "Talk," Hastings growled. "Who gave you the bomb? Where is Li Changyen?" The man's eyes darted wildly, but fear loosened his tongue. "I don't know his location. He communicates through the Raven, always through the Raven. The orders came from a drop in Paris. That's all I know." "The Raven again," Poirot mused. "And the drop, where is it?" The attaché hesitated, then spat out an address. "In Montmartre, but you're too late. The plan is bigger than one bomb. Li Changyen is untouchable." Poirot's smile was cold. "No one is untouchable, monsieur, not even number one." They bound the attaché and alerted conference security, ensuring the man was taken into custody. The disarmed bomb was handed over to a bomb squad, disguised as a routine inspection, to avoid panic. As the conference continued, Poirot and Hastings slipped away, their minds already on the next move. In a quiet cafe overlooking Lake Geneva, Poirot studied the address provided by the attaché. "Montmartre," he said, sipping an espresso. "The trail leads back to Paris. The Raven is the key. Hastings, I suspect they are closer than we think. What's our next step?" Hastings asked, his beard itching under the disguise. "We set a trap," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "Li Chang-yen believes he is a phantom, but even phantoms leave footprints. We return to Paris and lure him to us." As the sun dipped below the Alps, casting Geneva in twilight, Poirot's mind churned with plans. The Big Four's web was unraveling, but the final confrontation loomed. The chapter closed with Poirot and Hastings boarding a train to Paris. The address in Montmartre, their only lead, and the shadow of Li Chang-yen growing ever closer. Chapter 13. The Island Fortress. The Mediterranean sun hung low, casting a molten glow over the Tyrrhenian Sea as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stood on the deck of a weathered fishing boat. The vessel, piloted by a grizzled Sicilian named Matteo, churned toward a jagged speck on the horizon. Isola di Songhe, the rumored stronghold of the Big Four. The island's cliffs loomed like the teeth of some ancient beast, crowned by a fortress of weathered stone that seemed to grow from the rock itself. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, scanned the horizon, his mustache barely twitching against the salty breeze. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his linen suit, "this is no mere hideout. It is a labyrinth, designed to trap the unwary. The Big Four have chosen their lair well, but they underestimate the little grey cells." Hastings, gripping the rail to steady himself against the boat's sway, frowned. "Poirot, we're sailing into a fortress guarded by who knows what. Traps, assassins, maybe even that sonic weapon from Berlin. Are you sure about this?" "Certainty is a luxury, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. "But we have no choice. The Geneva conference was saved, yet Li Chang-yen, number one, remains free. This island holds the heart of their conspiracy. We must cut it out." Their journey to Isola di Sanghe had begun in Geneva, where Poirot's heroics had thwarted an assassination plot. A captured operative, broken by Poirot's relentless questioning, had revealed the island's location and its purpose, a command center where the Big Four's lieutenants orchestrated their global schemes, armed with a map sketched on a scrap of diplomatic stationery and a dossier of coded messages. Poirot and Hastings had boarded Matteo's boat under the guise of archaeologists seeking ancient ruins. The ruse was thin, but Matteo, paid handsomely in gold, asked no questions. As the boat neared the island, Matteo cut the engine, letting the vessel drift in the shadow of a cove. "Signore," he whispered, pointing to a hidden dock carved into the cliff. "That's your way in. But be warned, strange lights flicker in that fortress at night, and no fisherman who's ventured too close has returned." Poirot nodded, slipping Matteo an extra coin. "Your discretion is appreciated, Signore Matteo. Return for us at dawn, if we survive." The dock was slick with seaweed, and the air carried the tang of salt and decay. A narrow path wound up the cliff, its steps uneven and treacherous. Poirot, surprisingly agile for a man of his fastidious nature, led the way, his cane tapping softly against the stone. Hastings followed, clutching a small revolver, his eyes darting to every shadow at the cliff's summit. The fortress loomed a sprawling complex of turrets and walls, its windows dark like the eyes of a predator. A massive iron gate, etched with a subtle 4, barred their entry. Beside it, a panel of brass levers and dials gleamed in the moonlight, a lock unlike any they'd encountered. "Another puzzle," Hastings muttered, his voice tight. "Poirot, this looks like it could take hours to crack." "Nan," Poirot said, his fingers tracing the levers. "This is no ordinary lock. Observe the symbols, circles, triangles, a serpent. They correspond to the coded messages from Geneva. The Big Four are arrogant. They reuse their patterns. With a series of precise clicks, Poirot manipulated the levers, aligning them to form a sequence: circle, serpent, triangle. The gate groaned open, revealing a courtyard shrouded in mist. Inside, the fortress was a maze of stone corridors, lit by flickering gas lamps that cast eerie shadows. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of oil and something acrid, like burnt metal. Poirot's steps were deliberate, his senses attuned to every sound: a distant drip of water, the faint hum of machinery. Hastings, less composed, flinched at a sudden skittering noise. "Rats," he whispered, his grip tightening on the revolver. "Or something worse," Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. He pointed to a tripwire glinting faintly across the corridor. "Careful, mon ami. This place is a spider's web, and we are the flies." They navigated the corridor, sidestepping wires and pressure plates, Poirot's mind mapping the layout with uncanny precision. The first trap came without warning. A panel in the wall slid open, releasing a swarm of steel darts. Poirot shoved Hastings to the floor, the darts whistling overhead to embed in the opposite wall. "Mon Dieu," gasped, dusting off his suit. "They do not lack for creativity." The corridor led to a vast chamber, its ceiling vaulted like a cathedral. At its center stood a circular table, surrounded by 4 chairs, each marked with a numeral I, 2, 3, 4. Maps and documents littered the table, detailing operations from Shanghai to New York. Poirot's fingers danced over the papers, his eyes gleaming with discovery. "Look, Hastings," he said, holding up a blueprint. "Plans for a chemical weapon, to be deployed in London, and here a list of agents embedded in world governments. The Big Four's reach is deeper than we feared." Before Hastings could respond, a low rumble shook the chamber. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing a hidden trapdoor that yawned, open like a hungry mouth. Poirot grabbed Hastings, pulling him back just as the floor collapsed, exposing a pit lined with jagged spikes. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a woman, tall and angular, her face obscured by a hooded cloak. Her voice was cold, precise, like the click of a typewriter. "You are persistent, Monsieur Poirot," she said, stepping into the light. Her features were sharp, her eyes glinting with malice. "I am Elena Voss, sister of Wilhelm. You destroyed his work in Berlin, but you will not stop us here." "Madame Voss," Poirot said, his tone courteous but firm, "your brother's genius was wasted on destruction. Tell me, why serve Li Chang-yen? What hold does he have over you?" Elena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think you can reason with me? This fortress is our sanctuary, and you are its prisoners." She raised a slender device, its surface studded with buttons. "One press, and this chamber fills with gas. Or perhaps I'll let the traps finish you." Hastings raised his revolver, but Poirot placed a hand on his arm. "Non, Hastings. Madame Voss, you are not the master here. Li Chang-yen pulls your strings, as he did your brother's. Give us his location, and you may yet escape his shadow." Elena's eyes flickered with doubt, but before she could respond, the chamber shook again. A hidden panel in the ceiling opened, and a net of weighted chains dropped, aimed at Poirot and Hastings. Poirot dove to the side, dragging Hastings with him, as the chains crashed to the floor, splintering the table. Elena vanished into a side passage, her laughter echoing. "Blasted, Poirot," Hastings panted, scrambling to his feet. "She's toying with us." "She is desperate," Poirot corrected, brushing dust from his lapel. "Her traps are elaborate, but they betray her fear. Come, we must find her and the others." The pursuit led through a series of chambers, each more treacherous than the last. One room housed a pendulum blade, swinging with lethal precision. Poirot timed its arc, guiding Hastings through with seconds to spare. Another chamber was a hall of mirrors, reflecting their movements in disorienting patterns. Poirot shattered a mirror with his cane, revealing a hidden door dot in the final chamber. They found Elena and 2 others, a burly man with a scarred face and a wiry figure in a tailored suit, both marked with the numeral 4 on their rings. The Big Four's lieutenants. The room was a control center, its walls lined with screens displaying cities London, Paris, New York each, marked with targets. At the center stood a console, its dials and levers pulsing with energy. "You're too late," Elena sneered, her hand hovering over a switch. "This fortress is wired to self-destruct, and with it, all evidence of our work. You'll die with us, Poirot." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Madame, you assume I came unprepared." From his pocket, he produced a small device, a signal jammer, acquired from a Sicilian contact before their journey. "Your explosives rely on a wireless trigger." "Yes, this disrupts it. Your fortress is safe for now." The burly man lunged, but Hastings, emboldened, tackled him, pinning him against a screen. The wiry lieutenant drew a knife, but Poirot disarmed him with a flick of his cane, sending the blade skittering across the floor. Elena cornered, hesitated, her hand trembling over the console. "Enough," Madame Poirot said, his voice like a whip. "Your masters have abandoned you. Tell me where Li Chang-yen hides, and you may yet find mercy." Elena's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. "He's in France," she whispered, "a chateau in the Loire Valley. He plans to rebuild, to start again, but you'll never stop him." "We shall see," Poirot said, binding her wrists with a cord from his pocket. The other lieutenants, subdued, glared in silence. As dawn broke, Matteo's boat returned, and Poirot and Hastings escorted their prisoners aboard. The fortress's secret secured in a satchel of documents, the island receded into the mist, its traps disarmed, its lieutenants captured. But Poirot's mind was already in France, plotting the final confrontation with Li Chang-yen. Chapter 14. The Fall of the Four. The chateau perched atop a jagged cliff in the French countryside, its turrets clawing at a sky bruised with storm clouds. Hercule Poirot stood in the shadow of a gnarled oak, his black overcoat blending with the dusk, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the chateau's windows. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and betrayal, and the wind carried the faint toll of a village bell, counting down to a reckoning. Beside him, Captain Hastings adjusted his grip on a concealed revolver, his face taut with the weight of their mission. "Poirot," Hastings whispered, his voice nearly lost in the wind. "This feels like the endgame. Li Chang-yen, number one, of the Big Four, holed up in that fortress sits too perfect. Are you sure your plan will work?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a flicker of confidence beneath his somber gaze. "Mon ami, perfection is the trap of the arrogant. Li Chang-yen believes himself untouchable, but Hercule Poirot has woven a web of his own. Tonight, we end this." Their journey had brought them here, to this remote chateau in the Loire Valley, after months of chasing shadows across continents. The Big Four's network spanning Shanghai's opium dens, Venice's masked balls, Berlin's secret labs, and New York's glittering galas had crumbled under Poirot's relentless pursuit. Number 2, Claudette Moreau, was in custody. Number 3's sonic weapon was dismantled. Number 4's operatives were scattered. Only Li Chang-yen remained, the elusive mastermind whose vision of global domination had driven the Big Four's schemes. Poirot's plan hinged on a single, audacious gambit, a fake defector, a forged betrayal, and a trap to lure Li into the open. The chateau was a labyrinth of stone and secrets, its history steeped in intrigue. Once a retreat for French nobility, it was now a fortress for a modern tyrant. Poirot's contact, a disgraced operative named Marcel Dubois, had fed Li a carefully crafted lie that Dubois, once loyal to the Big Four, had turned traitor and sought to deliver Poirot himself as a prize. The bait was irresistible. His obsession with outwitting the detective had grown with each thwarted plan that as they approached the chateau's iron gates. Poirot adjusted his cravat, adopting the posture of a man defeated yet defiant. "Hastings, you must play your part to perfection," he said. "You are my captor, delivering me to Dubois. Let your anger be convincing, but not reckless." Hastings nodded, his jaw set. "I've had enough practice being cross with you, Poirot. This shouldn't be hard." They were met at the gate by 2 guards, their faces obscured by scarves, their rifles gleaming in the torchlight. "State your business," one growled, his accent thick with Eastern European inflection. Hastings squared his shoulders, channeling a soldier's authority. "Captain Arthur Hastings, delivering Hercule Poirot to Monsieur Dubois, has agreed. Tell your master his prize is here." The guards exchanged glances, then motioned them through. The courtyard was a maze of shadows, lined with statues of forgotten saints, their stone eyes seeming to watch every step. At the chateau's entrance, Marcel Dubois emerged, his lean frame draped in a tailored suit, his smile sharp as a blade. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice dripping with mock courtesy. "How delightful to see you in chains, metaphorically of course." Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of weary resignation. "Monsieur Dubois, your hospitality is as expected. I trust your new master will be equally accommodating." Dubois's smile faltered, but he gestured them inside. The chateau's interior was a study in contrasts. Opulent chandeliers hung above scarred oak floors, and tapestries of medieval hunts draped walls lined with modern surveillance equipment. The air hummed with tension, as if the very stones anticipated bloodshed. They were led to a grand hall, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. At the far end, seated at a long table like a king holding court, was Li Chang-yen, His silk robes shimmered in the candlelight, and his eyes dark onto Poirot with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. Around him stood a dozen operatives, their hands resting on weapons, their loyalty to Lee absolute. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot," Lee said, his voice smooth as polished jade. "You have been a most persistent thorn, but thorns, as you know, can be plucked." Poirot met his gaze, his own eyes gleaming with quiet defiance. "And yet, Monsieur Lee, it is you who sit in a cage of your own making. Your empire crumbles, your allies betray you. Even now, your loyal Dubois plays a dangerous game." Lee's smile didn't waver, but a flicker of doubt crossed his face. "Bold words for a man at my mercy. Dubois, you assured me this detective was broken, yet he speaks with the arrogance of one who holds the upper hand." Dubois stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with nervousness. "He is defeated, my lord. His words are mere bravado. I have brought him to you, as promised, to end this chase." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Defeated? Nan, Monsieur Lee. Hercule Poirot is never defeated. He observes, he deduces, he acts, and tonight he has deduced that your trust in Dubois is misplaced." The room tensed, hands tightening on weapons. Lee's eyes narrowed, flicking to Dubois. "Explain yourself, Marcel." Dubois paled, his composure cracking. "He lies, my lord. I am loyal to you, to the Big Four." But Poirot pressed on, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "Loyal or cunning? Consider, Monsieur Lee, the documents Dubois provided. You plans for a coup that never materialized, a defector who promised my capture yet delivered me unbound. Why? Because Dubois works for me." The hall erupted. Operatives drew their weapons, but Hastings was faster, his revolver trained on Dubois. "Don't move," he barked, his soldiers' instincts taking over. Lee's men hesitated, caught in the sudden shift of power. Lee rose, his calm fracturing. "You dare to play me, Poirot. You think this charade will save you." "It is no charade," Poirot said, stepping forward, his voice rising with conviction. "Your empire is built on fear, but fear breeds betrayal. Dubois came to me weeks ago, desperate to escape your shadow. He fed you lies, led you to this moment, where your guard is down and your enemies are near." Lee's hand shot to a concealed panel on the table, but Poirot anticipated the move. With a flick of his cane, he struck Lee's wrist, sending a hidden dagger clattering to the floor. "Nan, Monsieur Lee, your tricks are spent." The doors to the hall burst open, and Inspector Japp stormed in, leading a squad of French gendarmes and British agents. The raid was swift, a whirlwind of shouts and gunfire. Lee's operatives, caught off guard, surrendered or fell. Dubois, his role as double agent complete, slipped into the shadows. His debt to Poirot paid. Li Chang-yen stood alone, his silk robes now seeming more like a shroud. "You think this ends it, Poirot?" he said, his voice low but venomous. "The Big Four are an idea, not a man. Others will rise." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his tone serene. "But ideas without power are but whispers in the wind. Your network is shattered, your lieutenants captured or dead. The world will breathe easier without your shadow." Lee lunged, a final act of defiance, but Japp's men were on him, binding his wrists. As they led him away, Lee's eyes burned. Into Poirot's, a promise of vengeance that would never be fulfilled. The chateau grew quiet, the storm outside breaking at last, rain lashing the windows. Poirot and Hastings stood in the hall, surrounded by the wreckage of Lee's ambition. "It's over, isn't it?" Hastings said, his voice heavy with relief. Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant. "For now, mon ami, evil is tenacious, but so is justice. Tonight, we have struck a blow for order, for reason. Let us return to London and rest." They stepped into the rain, the chateau fading into the mist behind them. The Big Four were no more, their web of deceit unraveled by the relentless logic of Hercule Poirot. As the train carried them back to London, Poirot gazed out at the passing fields, his mind already turning to the next mystery, the next challenge. For now, though, the world was safe, and the little Belgian detective allowed himself a rare moment of peace. Chapter 15. The echoes of truths. The London fog had settled like a shroud over Baker Street, its tendrils curling round the gas lamps and muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carriages. Inside Hercule Poirot's impeccably ordered flat, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the polished mahogany furniture. Poirot, dressed in a velvet smoking jacket, sat in his favorite armchair, his fingers steepled as he stared into the flames. Captain Hastings, sprawled on a settee with a glass of brandy, broke the silence. "Well, Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with relief, "it's over. The Big Four are finished. Li Changyen in custody. His lieutenants scattered. Their network in ruins. I'd say we've earned a rest." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint shadow crossing his sharp green eyes. "Mon ami, the world is never so tidy as to allow a complete rest. The Big Four may be broken, but their echoes linger. Evil, like a stone cast into a pond, sends ripples far beyond the initial splash." Hastings frowned, setting his glass down. "Ripples? What do you mean?" "We've got them all. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. The ledger, the operatives, the plans, they're all accounted for." Poirot rose, pacing to the window where the fog pressed against the panes like a living thing. "And yet, Hastings, there is one name that haunts me still. The Raven, the operative mentioned in Paris, in Geneva, yet never unmasked. Who is this figure, and why did they vanish when Li Changyen fell?" Hastings shrugged. Perhaps the Raven was just a code, a myth to keep the Big Four's operatives in line. "Nan," Poirot said sharply, turning to face him, "the Raven is real, and I fear they are not done with us." The words hung in the air, heavy with foreboding. Poirot's unease stemmed from a discovery made in the aftermath of Li Changyen's capture, a single coded message, found in the chateau where number 1 had been apprehended, hinting at a contingency plan. The message, scrawled in a cipher Poirot had yet to fully crack, mentioned a final act and a rendezvous in London. It was this clue that had kept Poirot awake through the long nights since their return, his little grey cells churning with possibilities. The next morning, as the fog began to lift, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Inspector Japp, the Scotland Yard man. His face ruddy from the chill, carried a leather satchel and a grim expression. "Morning, Poirot." "Hastings," he said, tossing his hat onto a chair. "I hope you're ready for trouble, because it's found you." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Trouble, mon cher Japp? Of what nature?" Japp opened the satchel, producing a stack of photographs and a sealed envelope. "These came to my desk this morning, anonymous but marked for you. Look at the photos first." Hastings leaned over as Poirot spread the images across the table. They showed a series of seemingly unrelated scenes: a crowded London dockyard, a shadowed alley in Whitechapel, a grand estate in Kensington, and a dimly lit warehouse with crates stamped with unfamiliar symbols. Each photo bore a faint watermark, a stylized raven in flight. "The Raven," Poirot murmured, his voice low. "This is no coincidence." Japp nodded. "There's more. The envelope contains a letter, but it's in some kind of code. My boys at the yard can't make heads or tails of it." Poirot opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper covered in a grid of letters and numbers, interspersed with cryptic phrases in French, German, and what appeared to be Mandarin. At the bottom, a single line stood out: "The truth lies where the raven nests, at the heart of the empire." "Hastings," Poirot said, his tone urgent, "this is a challenge. The Raven is taunting us, daring us to uncover their final act. We must decipher this message and find their nest before it is too late." Over the next hours Poirot set to work, his desk a chaos of papers, maps, and reference books. The cipher was unlike any he had encountered, a hybrid of substitution and transposition, layered with linguistic misdirection. Hastings, ever practical, fetched coffee and took notes, while Japp coordinated with his contacts at the yard to investigate the locations in the photographs. By midday Poirot had cracked the first layer of the cipher, revealing a set of coordinates pointing to the port of London. "The dockyard," he said, tapping the corresponding photo. "This is where we begin. The Raven is moving something or someone through the port." The trio arrived at the dockyard as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the maze of cranes and cargo. The air was thick with the tang of salt and oil, and the shouts of dockworkers mingled with the creak of ropes and the groan of ships. Poirot, disguised in a worker's cap and coat to blend in, led the way, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. "There," he said, pointing to a stack of crates near a rusted freighter. The same raven symbol from the photographs was stenciled on the wood, faint but unmistakable. Japp signaled for backup, but Poirot held up a hand. "Not yet, Inspector. We must see what the Raven intends before we spring the trap." They hid behind a pile of barrels, watching as a group of men in dark coats approached the crates. One figure stood out, a woman, her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, her movements graceful yet commanding. She spoke in low tones to the others, her words inaudible but her authority clear. "The Raven," Poirot whispered. "She is here." Before they could move, a sudden explosion rocked the dockyard, a diversion, not deadly but chaotic, sending workers scrambling and smoke billowing into the sky. In the confusion, the woman and her men vanished, leaving the crates behind. Poirot, undeterred, approached the crates and pried one open, revealing a cache of documents and a small, intricate device, a communicator perhaps, or a tracking beacon. "Jap, secure these," Poirot ordered. "Hastings, with me." The Raven cannot have gone far. They pursued the woman through the labyrinthine dockyard, her silhouette fleeting in the fog. The chase led them to an abandoned warehouse, its windows shattered and its interior a cavern of shadows. Inside, the air was heavy with dust, and the faint drip of water echoed from somewhere deep within. "Careful," Hastings, Poirot cautioned, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is her domain." They moved cautiously, guided by the faint glow of a lantern the woman had left behind. It was a trap, Poirot knew, but also an opportunity. The warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery, and at its center stood a makeshift command poster table strewn with maps, photographs, and a second ciphered message. The woman, the Raven, stood waiting, her hat discarded to reveal a face both striking and cold, with eyes that burned with defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth as silk but laced with venom. "You are persistent. I'll give you that, but you're too late. The Big Four may be gone, but their legacy lives in me." "Who are you?" Poirot demanded, his tone steady. "And what is this final act?" She smiled, a predator's grin. "I am Elise Veron, the Raven." Li Chang-yen was a visionary, but he lacked flexibility. "I am his successor, and my plan is already in motion. These documents, this device, they are but pieces of a larger game. A new order will rise from the ashes of your victory." Hastings stepped forward, his revolver drawn. "Enough games. Tell us what you're planning," or Elise laughed, cutting him off. "Shoot me, Captain, and you'll never know. The device you found, it's a signal, already sent. By dawn, a chain of events will unfold that not even you, Poirot, can stop." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The device, the documents, the coordinates, they pointed to a coordinated strike, not on a single target, but on multiple points across London: banks, government offices, communication hubs. The Raven's final act was a decentralized attack, designed to cripple the city's infrastructure, and so panic, Jap, Poirot said into his earpiece. "Evacuate the targets listed in the documents. Banks, telegraph offices, the Houses of Parliament now." As Jap relayed the orders, Poirot turned to Elise. "You underestimate the power of order. Mademoiselle Veron, your chaos will not prevail." She moved suddenly, triggering a hidden mechanism. The floor beneath Poirot and Hastings shuddered, and a section of the warehouse collapsed, sending crates tumbling. In the chaos, Elise slipped away, but not before Poirot grabbed a map from the table. Its edges marked with the Raven symbol. The chase continued through the night, from the warehouse to the shadowed alleys of Whitechapel, where Poirot deciphered the map's clues, leading them to the Kensington estate from the photographs. The estate, owned by a reclusive financier with ties to the Big Four, was the Raven's final stronghold. As dawn broke, Poirot, Hastings, and Jap's men stormed the grounds, navigating booby traps and armed guards. In the estate's grand library, they cornered Elise Veron. She stood before a roaring fire, burning the last of her documents. "You're too late," she taunted. "The signals are sent. London will burn." But Poirot, ever the master of timing, revealed his trump card. "Mademoiselle, your device was sabotaged before it could transmit fully. Your signals were intercepted, your operatives arrested. The game is over." Elise's face crumpled, her defiance giving way to despair. "You can't stop progress, Poirot. The world will change, with or without me." "Change, perhaps," Poirot replied, "but not through chaos. Order and justice will always prevail." Jap's men took Elise into custody, and the estate was secured. The documents revealed the full scope of her planner network of sleeper agents, now neutralized thanks to Poirot's foresight. As they returned to Baker Street, the fog lifting to reveal a clear morning, Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. You did it again, old chap. The ravens clipped, and London's safe. Poirot smiled faintly, but his eyes were distant. For now, Hastings, but the world is vast, and the echoes of truth will always call us to action.